Chapter 935. Uncle Cheng's back? Fifth Elder asked nervously. Although Fifth Elder usually had a bad opinion of Uncle Cheng, he didn't want a traitor to appear in Myriad Merchant Hall, especially Uncle Cheng who had followed Master Ning for so many years. He didn't come back. It's just that the manager of Prosperous Heaven Bank said he saw Uncle Cheng a few nights ago, the manservant replied truthfully. A few days ago? Which day? Tang Li asked warily. Reporting to son-in-law, this one isn't sure. This one has already found the manager of Prosperous Heaven Bank. He's waiting at the door, the manservant replied. Why haven't you called him in yet? Tang Li was anxious. They'd only confirmed that Deacon Jean was no longer in three-way black market after 2 days, yet they didn't have a single clue. Cloud Realm was so big, where could he find his wife and children? As soon as Prosperous Heaven Bank's manager came in, Tang Li shouted angrily, When did you see Uncle Cheng? Speak in detail or you'll lose your life. Prosperous Heaven Bank's manager was frightened by these words and sent a pleading look to Fifth Elder. Because Han Yunshi had personally instructed him before leaving, Fifth Elder was very polite and cooperative to Tang Li. He also said angrily, Tell me everything you know in detail. If you hide anything you'll bear the consequences. Prosperous Heaven Bank's manager didn't dare to be negligent and immediately reported everything Uncle Cheng had said and done at Prosperous Heaven Bank that night. Fifth Elder was shocked. You're saying that on the night Princess and Head Elder returned, Uncle Cheng went to Prosperous Heaven Bank? Exactly. This one doesn't dare to lie. At the time there were 3 workers in the bank who all saw it, Prosperous Heaven Bank's manager answered truthfully. After a moment's hesitation he said, Fifth Elder, yesterday Uncle Cheng received a sum of money, I don't know. Uncle Cheng was in charge of many and miscellaneous affairs in the D clan, so he also had a lot of accounts on hand. Most of them came from Prosperous Heaven Bank, so this wasn't strange. However, for Prosperous Heaven Bank's manager to mention it like this, there must be something strange. Why are you being so long-winded? The Fifth Elder said unhappily. It was only then that Tianlong's shopkeeper did not hide the fact that Tang Li was present. He reported seriously, Uncle Cheng's debt is relatively large. It's more than 100 million. What debt? The Great Elder's voice rang out before he even arrived. Soon, everyone saw him enter from the side door. It's very strange. The person who sent the banknotes didn't say anything. He only left 2 surnames and said that Uncle Cheng would understand. The Tianlong shopkeeper answered truthfully. What surname? Great Elder asked uneasily. Jia and Dai. Tianlong's shopkeeper replied. Jia Dai. The Great Elder's face was pale and he almost fell forward. Fortunately the attendant caught him in time. Jia and Dai, how were these 2 surnames? They were the same name. She was the original owner of West Jade Garden and South Ju Garden. Only the Council of Elders knew the details of the purchase of the gardens. Tianlong's shopkeeper naturally did not recognize this name. That day, the Great Elder had rushed back to three-way black market after he and the princess had finished discussing all matters. Uncle Cheng had clearly said that he was going south to hire a dealer for the new casino. Who would have thought that he would actually go to Prosperous Heaven Bank that night? This was obviously a lie. And after so many days, Jia and Dai had actually sent money to Uncle Cheng. If the Great Elder still did not understand that there was something fishy about this, he should commit suicide as an apology. Where did Uncle Cheng go that night? The Great Elder asked angrily. Tianlong's shopkeeper, who did not understand the situation, shook his head repeatedly. Uncle Cheng seemed to be waiting for someone. He left without waiting. This lowly one has not seen him since. The Fifth Elder's face was livid, while Tang Li sneered inwardly. Han Yunshi had told him about the purchase of the gardens. Uncle Cheng was disloyal to Myriad Merchant Hall and was in charge of its defense. This was too suspicious. Tang Li thought that Jia Dai must have received his older brother's orders. Otherwise, he would not have been so generous as to spend 100 million in banknotes to expose Uncle Cheng. Tang Li did not bat an eyelid. The Fifth Elder and the Great Elder exchanged glances. They had finally suspected Uncle Cheng. That day, the Great Elder ordered the transfer of guards from the military to replace all of Myriad Merchant Hall's guards. At the same time, he ordered the entire D clan to remove Uncle Cheng from all of his duties and authority and put Uncle Cheng on the wanted list. The Fifth Elder invited Tang Li to search for Jia Dai together, but Tang Li refused. Tang Li remained at Myriad Merchant Hall to investigate the guards in charge of the palace. Uncle Cheng's suspicions made the Great Elder realize the severity of the situation. He handed over the affairs of the auction house to others and personally interrogated the people from the former East Valley Bank to track down Deacon Jin's whereabouts. The 2 guards that the Great Elder had sent to Han Yunxi's side had given him false information, but the Great Elder's report to Han Yunxi was the truth. The Great Elder would promptly send a letter to Han Yunxi whenever there was any progress in the case of Ning Jing and Mu Ling'er's robbery. That afternoon Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi settled down in a border town. Han Yunxi received the news that Uncle Cheng had been exposed. 100 million. Han Yunxi's heart ached for Long Fei Yi. If it wasn't for Long Fei Yi's instructions, Jia Dai wouldn't have dared to spend so much. Long Fei Yi didn't take it to heart. He picked up some food for Han Yunxi. After traveling for several days they could finally eat hot food. They would stay in the town for the night. Starting tomorrow they would head straight for 100 Poisons sect. There would be no more time to rest on the road. Thus he had Uncle Gao and Su Donglin hurry yesterday and reach the town in the afternoon. He wanted to give Han Yunxi ample time to rest, and also let Su Donglin and Uncle Gao replenish their rations. When Han Yunxi left Myriad Merchant Hall, she had specifically asked the 5th Elder to keep an eye out for Gu's whereabouts. She didn't dare mention it in front of Long Fei Yi. Just what did Gu Qixiao run into at Black Tower? Why was there still no news of him? There was one more thing that Han Yunxi didn't understand. Long Fei Yi by Yu Qiao kidnapped Ning Cheng. There should be news by now, right? She asked seriously. Bai Yu Qiao had kidnapped Ning Cheng for so long. It should be time to use Ning Cheng to threaten the D clan. However, there was no news at all. Could it be that Bai Yu Qiao was still hell-bent on finding Bai Yanqing after being tortured to such an extent by Bai Yanqing? Long Fei Yi had also been considering this matter. There's no news from Jun Yixia's side either. Could it be that she really went to find Bai Yanqing? Could she be hiding in 100 Poisons sect? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Long Fei Yi couldn't figure it out and asked back. Bai Yanqing still hasn't made any moves in Northern Li. What exactly does he want to do? Bai Yanqing hadn't gained any advantage from the D clan and had fallen at Black Tower. He should have returned to Northern Li to help Jun Yixia fight against the Northern Dynasty's emperors. However, Long Fei Yi had been keeping an eye on Northern Li's situation and hadn't received any news about Bai Yanqing. Jun Yixia hadn't made any moves either. No matter what he wants to do, we can't let him escape this time. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with viciousness. This time she had to be ruthless. No matter what the reason was, no matter who it was, she couldn't be stopped. After dinner, the sky had just darkened. Long Fei Yi taught Han Yunxi a few moves of the hidden needle technique. Han Yunxi learned very quickly. She had already cultivated her internal energy and could control the power of nirvana at will. Now, what she needed to do was to learn the needle technique that Long Fei Yi had personally created for her. She named that nameless needle technique the Flying Cloud Needle Technique. Han Yunxi had just injected the needle according to Long Fei Yi's instructions when Long Fei Yi laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Han Yunxi asked, puzzled. Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Instead, he retreated 10 steps and said to her, "Shoot the needle at me. If you hit it, you'll be heavily rewarded." Han Yunxi was amused. "You want me to finish my apprenticeship so soon? If you hit it, you can consider it." Long Fei Yi wasn't joking. Not only did Han Yunxi have an extremely high innate talent for cultivating internal energy, her comprehension was also very high. This kind of genius only needed a few pointers, and it wasn't impossible for her to learn without a teacher. Of course, he wouldn't let her learn without a teacher. He still enjoyed the process of teaching her martial arts. No matter how high Han Yunxi's innate talent was, if it wasn't a sneak attack, it was impossible to hit him. She had just cultivated her internal energy, so he wasn't in a hurry to dual cultivate the lustful power with her. He wanted to let her rest for a while and practice the needle technique well. "Then I'll change the needle just in case?" Han Yunxi joked. Her needles were all poisonous. Long Fei Yi smiled but didn't say anything. He walked a few steps closer, closing the distance to help her reduce the difficulty. "Be careful, I'm going to shoot the needle." Han Yunxi laughed mischievously. Long Fei Yi didn't panic as he waited. Han Yunxi took a stance but didn't make a move for a long time. She just smiled foolishly at Long Fei Yi. "Still not making a move?" Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunxi pretended to shoot, but all she did was shoot an empty needle. Long Fei saw through her at a glance. "Playing dirty? I don't dare." Han Yunxi laughed. However, while she was laughing, 10 golden needles shot out and all of them hit Long Fei Yi's vital points without exception. Long Fei Yi didn't move. Seeing that the golden needles were about to enter his body, he didn't move at all. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi was anxious. She was just playing with him. She was sure that he would dodge, so she was so ruthless. Han Yunxi rushed over. However, in an instant, the golden needles all entered Long Fei Ye's body. Han Yunshi suddenly stopped. Although these golden needles weren't poisonous, they all hit vital points. The consequences were worse than being poisoned. What was this guy trying to do? She stopped and looked at him in disbelief. Unexpectedly, his eyes turned cold. The 10 golden needles suddenly bounced off his body and flew towards Han Yunshi's body according to their original path. So, he was playing dirty? Han Yunshi anxiously wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The 10 golden needles all entered her body. Fortunately, there was a difference between her and Long Fei Ye's body. The golden needles flew back according to their original path and didn't hit her vital points, but it hurt. Long Fei Yi, you're more treacherous than me. Han Yunshi angrily rebuked. The enemy is more treacherous than me. Remember, all's fair in war, especially when using hidden weapons. Many of the hits are just illusions. Long Fei Yi walked over as he asked indifferently, does it hurt? Han Yunshi immediately nodded. Besides her own medical needles, most of her needles had been specially made by Long Fei at the Tang clan's behest. The tips of the needles would hook into the flesh, making it very, very painful to be pierced. The instant the needle was pierced, it hurt even more when it was pulled out. You'll remember it when it hurts, Long Fei Yi said. I'll remember it. Han Yunshi didn't argue. Let's do it again. A strict teacher produces a fine student. But Long Fei simply scooped her up and carried her into the rooms. What are you doing? Han Yunshi asked, puzzled. I'm going to get rid of the needles, Long Fei Yi said indifferently. Just pull them out, Han Yunshi said. It'll hurt. Take care of it slowly in the house. I need to apply some medicine. Although Long Fei Ye's face was cold as ice, his words were simply too warm. What happened to being a strict teacher? Han Yunshi was very worried that she wouldn't be able to become a fine student. She had to seriously consider whether she should let Long Fei Yi personally teach the children martial arts in the future. That night, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi stayed at the inn while Gu and Gu Beiyue arrived at the three-way black market. Chapter 936. As soon as they arrived at three-way black market, Gu took Gu Beiyue directly to Golden Wing Palace. Gu Beiyue was very surprised. Since when did Golden Wing Palace fall into your hands? Gu Qishao was too lazy to explain, but carelessly went to sit on the golden laid throne in Golden Wing Hall's main hall. He crossed his legs and lazily ordered, someone come, call the head manager over. Gu Beiyue glanced at him and chose a seat beside him. He smiled helplessly and didn't pursue the matter. When the head manager of Golden Wing Palace arrived, he immediately knelt. This subordinate greets master. Welcome back to the palace, master. This is the head of Medical City, Dr. Gu Beiyue. He's my brother. Gu introduced him. The head manager didn't dare to be negligent and immediately bowed deeply, much less the title of head of Medical City. Gu Beiyue didn't put on any airs. He was modest and polite, like a flawless piece of white jade, gentle and warm. The head manager had seen many important people, but he was immediately impressed by Gu Beiyue. What's the situation at Myriad Merchant Hall? Gu asked. The first thing he did after returning was to check on the results. He was the one who had stirred up the storm in Myriad Merchant Hall's gambling house and auction house. More accurately, he had stirred up all the gambling houses in three-way black market. Although Gu Beiyue was a bit confused, he sat quietly to the side and listened. Master, Myriad Merchant Hall's gambling houses are all closed. Gu was quite satisfied with the head manager's words. He lazily tilted his head and looked at Gu Beiyue. Money is the D clan's lifeline. If we want to take care of them, we have to cut off their source of income. Gu Beiyue nodded thoughtfully, agreeing with this point of view. What about the auction house? Is it closed as well? Gu asked carelessly. He had full confidence in this storm. The head shopkeeper silently wiped away his cold sweat and truthfully reported, Master, Myriad Merchant Hall's auction house hasn't opened for several days. It's about to close, but what? Gu became alert. Could it be that there were more variables? Reputation was the most important thing in an auction. Unless Myriad Merchant Hall found the traitor and could prove that they had been framed, this black mark could not be washed away. If Myriad Merchant Hall found the traitor, wouldn't Golden Wing Hall be exposed? But I don't know where Myriad Merchant Hall got the ability to cooperate with Kangon Private Bank and play some kind of debt game. In short, they've borrowed Kangon Private Bank's reputation, and their business is even more prosperous than before. They've stolen a lot of our business. The head shopkeeper answered honestly. Before Gu could understand what was going on, the quiet Gu Beiyue suddenly exclaimed, Kangon Bank? Exactly. No matter how big the problem is, as long as Kangon Private Bank is willing to step in, it won't be a problem. The head shopkeeper could not help but sigh. Ruining this old man's business? Of course Gu knew of Kangon Private Bank's wealth, but he didn't think much of it. As long as he was unhappy, he'd accompany them to the end no matter the price. He narrowed his eyes, his expression dangerous. But Gu Beiyue's whispered words made his face pale. Gu Beiyue murmured, "Seventh young master, Kangon Private Bank's master is Long Feiyi." Gu gave a start before he exclaimed, "What did you say? There's something fishy about this. There must be some inside story." Gu Beiyue grew serious. Long Feiyi had always known that Myriad Merchant Hall was part of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. It was already good enough that he didn't make a move against them, so why would he use Kangon Private Bank's reputation to help them? While Gu's heart was still in turmoil, Gu Beiyue had long calmed down and looked at the head shopkeeper. "You're certain that Kangon Private Bank is cooperating with Myriad Merchant Hall? Have you found out who's pulling the strings?" Myriad Merchant Hall and Kangon Private Bank had never cooperated before, so there had to be someone pulling the strings. "That's not clear. This subordinate will investigate immediately." The head shopkeeper was about to leave when Gu Beiyue called him back. "Hold on, is Myriad Merchant Hall managed by the Council of Elders, or is Ning Qing personally in charge? A few days ago there was an explosion at Black Tower. Everyone says that Ning Qing brought along the red-robed men. There are many rumors, but this subordinate hasn't been able to find out the truth. Myriad Merchant Hall has always been managed by the Council of Elders. You can even see a few of them at the auction house these days," the head shopkeeper replied honestly. The head shopkeeper had no idea what was going on at Black Tower, but Gu and Gu Beiyue had a rough idea. When they passed by Black Tower, they saw that it had already been reduced to ruins. Gu Beiyue turned to Gu and said, "Let's find out more about Black Tower first before we discuss the rest?" Gu recovered his wits and silently sighed with emotion. Gu Beiyue really hid himself too deeply. He was a doctor, but he knew the business world and three-way black market like the back of his hand. Gu wasn't so patient. His face was gloomy as he said, "Find out what? I'll go find Ning Qing right now." Gu Beiyue stopped him and said, "I keep feeling that there's more to Kangon Private Bank's cooperation with Myriad Merchant Hall than meets the eye." After some hesitation he said to Gu, "I'll take you somewhere. Do you dare?" "Where?" Gu didn't understand. Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. "You'll know when we get there. Then let's go." Besides a certain cave in Cloud Realm continent, there was nowhere Gu didn't dare to go. Gu Beiyue brought Gu to none other than East Origin Hall. When Gu followed Gu Beiyue out of the secret passageway and into the back courtyard of East Origin Hall, Gu couldn't help but exclaim, "Well done, Gu Beiyue. So you're the mastermind behind East Origin Hall." Gu Beiyue smiled and replied modestly, "Seventh young master misunderstands. This one is only a poor doctor. This is—" Gu Beiyue couldn't help but laugh. Gu looked doubtful. "What do you mean?" "Seventh young master, this is the East Qing Crown Prince's territory," Gu Beiyue said. In a flash, Gu's entire body seemed to stiffen. Only his eyes could move and he rolled them around like a marionette. Wasn't it enough to be attacked twice in a day? Both attacks came from the same person. Long Feiyi. Gu gritted his teeth. A complicated look flickered past Gu Beiyue's eyes. He didn't know whether to joke or not, but said seriously, "Seventh young master, I can't guarantee anything else. But I, Gu Beiyue, can guarantee with my life that Long Feiyi isn't using the princess." Was Gu Beiyue trying to coax peace? Perhaps Gu Qishao and Long Fei were born to be incompatible, because he only laughed coldly and didn't reply. There must be an inside story behind Kangon Private Bank and Myriad Merchant Hall's cooperation. If you ask here, it'll definitely be truer than what you found at Myriad Merchant Hall. Gu Beiyue explained. Long Feiyi wouldn't lie to me. Moreover, I have to let Long Feiyi know as soon as possible that Bai Yanqing has no more bargaining chips in his hands. Gu's face was still gloomy, but he still followed Gu Beiyue towards the East Origin Hall's Council of Elders. On the way, he didn't spare a glance at East Origin Hall and discovered that it was even more luxurious than Myriad Merchant Hall. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to. Long Feiyi was Cloud Realm Continent's richest man. Soon enough they ran into a guard. Gu Beiyue immediately told him to send word that he wanted to see the head elder. Who knew that not long after the attendant left, a familiar figure would run towards them. Tangli. Gu narrowed his eyes. "You brat, you won quite a bit of money at 1,000 Gold Pavilion." Tangli looked Gu Beiyue up and down at a loss for words. In the end he blurted out, Dr. Gu, my big bro misses you every day. Gu Beiwei gave a start, but Gu only laughed out loud. Gu Beiwei, Long Fei Yi treats you with deep affection. Tang Li realized he'd said the wrong thing in his excitement. He was about to explain when Gu Beiwei smiled. Tang Clan head, I wonder where the East Qing Crown Prince is right now? Did he receive the secret letter I sent him? And also, why is Kangon Private Bank cooperating with Myriad Merchant Hall? Gu Beiwei's questions were all critical. Tang Li immediately told him everything that had happened recently. Gu Beiwei listened attentively from beginning to end, while Gu Qixiao's face was a myriad of colors that kept changing. When he heard about the hostages, pain flashed through his eyes. When he heard that Ning Cheng had been kidnapped, he fell into deep thought. And when he heard that Han Yunxi had used less than 10 days to resolve the crisis in Myriad Merchant Hall's gambling house and auction house and take control of Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders, he smiled bitterly. There was nothing he could do, everything was explained clearly. Han Yunxi had already made her choice and was fighting side by side with Long Fei Yi. What else did he have to fight for? Actually, he hadn't lost to Long Fei Yi but to Han Yunxi. As long as he was willing with his immortal body, he could single-handedly fight against all forces and obtain everything. As long as she was willing, he could give her anything. Unfortunately, she wasn't willing. Han Yunxi could overlook such a deep national enmity. Even if they were to meet on the battlefield, Han Yunxi would still choose Long Fei Yi. Just how much did his poison last like Long Fei? His original hot-bloodedness seemed to have been extinguished by cold water. Gu shrugged and smiled. He didn't seem to be dispirited. He was still frivolous and did things his own way. Under Tang Li and Gu Beiwei's gaze, he smiled and said nonchalantly, as long as Poison Girl likes it. He turned to leave after he finished speaking, but Gu Beiwei quickly stopped him. Where are you going? To help Poison Girl find medicine. Fractures hurt a lot, Gu said calmly. Just a moment ago, he had been so full of himself, wanting to conquer the world for her. Now, he couldn't care less about anything other than the small matter of her wound hurting. Gu Beiwei suddenly realized that his previous worries were somewhat laughable. Looking at Gu's back, he suddenly felt that his heart was no longer as lonely as before. Xiaoqi, do you know that I love her too? The seventh young master had already walked far away when Tang Li suddenly remembered something and shouted anxiously, Gu Mu Linger has been kidnapped. She and Ning Jing have been kidnapped in Myriad Merchant Hall. He had been too excited just now and had been talking about his brother and sister-in-law. He had actually forgotten about this. Gu stopped abruptly. He finally remembered that he had left Mu Linger behind in Myriad Merchant Hall. He turned around and asked, who did it? Tang Li named the suspect. He had come to East Origin Hall today to dispatch men to help track down Deacon Jean and Uncle Cheng's whereabouts. Gu Beiwei made a prompt decision. Seventh young master, stay behind and help Tang Li. I'll go to 100 Poisons sect. The princess leg has been recovering for so long. She'll be fine after a few rounds of acupuncture. Leave it to me. Chapter 937. With Gu's temperament, Tang Li thought that he would reject Gu Beiwei's suggestion, and Gu Beiwei was prepared to persuade him otherwise. If Gu was the palace lord of Golden Wing Hall, then he would be able to help Tang Li in the three-way black market. At the very least, he would be able to find some clues about Deacon Jean. Deacon Jin's East Valley Private Bank didn't only do business in Myriad Merchant Hall's casinos, but also in Golden Wing Hall and East Origin Hall's casinos. If Golden Wing Hall could provide assistance, Gu Beiwei didn't believe that the three major powers of the three-way black market wouldn't be able to find a single person even if they worked together. Gu hesitated for a moment but didn't refuse. He said to Gu Beiwei, if you need any medicinal ingredients, feel free to contact the Medicine Ghost Valley. Also, I will send someone to help you find the dragon pill. Ever since Gu Beiwei was severely injured by the two elders of the Chu clan, his dantian had been damaged, and his inner strength had dissipated. No matter how much he cultivated, he couldn't gather qi. Elder Kenzo had told Long Fei Yi that there was a medicine in this world called the dragon pill that could heal Gu Beiwei's injuries. However, Long Fei Yi still hadn't found this medicine. A few months ago, Long Fei Yi had sent Gu Beiwei a phoenix habitat pill, which had allowed Gu Beiwei to recover 20 to 30% of his strength. The dragon pill only existed in legends. Long Fei Yi had used all his resources but still couldn't find any clues. Even though finding medicine was Gu's forte, if this medicine didn't exist in this world, how could he find it? Gu Beiwei didn't have much hope, but he still bowed in thanks. Gu glanced at him unhappily. Why are you being so polite? Just like that, Tang Li sent a letter to Long Fei Yi informing him that Gu Beiwei had been rescued. At the same time, he sent a few elites to secretly escort Gu Beiyue to 100 Poison sect. Gu stayed behind. After sending off Gu Beiyue, he went to Willowflower Lane alone. He was much better than Tang Li at the brothel. If Mu Linger knew that her Qi brother did not rush to find medicine for Han Yunxi but stayed to look for her, she would be so moved that she would burst into tears. However, at this moment she was working hard for herself. The carriage stopped at the foot of the mountain. Ning Jing and Mu Ling were tied up in the carriage. Both of their legs were tied up. The two robbers were resting on a tree not far away. The old man in black leaned against the tree trunk with his arms crossed and his eyes narrowed. The young man was lying on the overgrown tree trunk, his hands behind his head. His eyes were wide open. The moonlight that sifted through the canopy shone into his eyes, reflecting his many years of loneliness and wandering. A homeless person would always have a ray of moonlight hidden in his heart. That was the bright moonlight that illuminated the mountains and rivers of his hometown. "Old Ching, shouldn't we ask for money from Myriad Merchant Hall?" he asked calmly. Yes, he was Deacon Jean. The Deacon Jean who had been tricked by Ning Jing into losing everything, and then tricked by Mu Ling into a huge debt. That night, he had met Uncle Cheng in Willowflower Lane. Uncle Cheng could not take out the money and wanted to kill him to silence him. Uncle Cheng had truly underestimated him. In a few moves, he had killed all the experts Uncle Cheng had brought and captured Uncle Cheng. He had originally wanted to take Uncle Cheng to Myriad Merchant Hall to negotiate with Han Yunxi. However, Uncle Cheng had stopped him. Han Yunxi was a woman who would not take even the slightest loss. If Han Yunxi knew that he had colluded with Uncle Cheng, he would not be able to get anything out of it. When the time came, he would not be able to pay back his debt. Perhaps he would even be sold off. Uncle Cheng had helped him come up with an idea. He wanted him to kidnap Mu Ling. He had long wanted to settle the score with Mu Ling. Unfortunately, Myriad Merchant Hall was heavily guarded, and he could not enter. However, with Uncle Cheng's help, it was easy for him and Uncle Cheng to sneak into Myriad Merchant Hall. His target was Mu Ling, but he had not expected that Uncle Cheng would kidnap Ning Jing as well. According to Uncle Cheng, kidnapping Ning Jing was to mislead the public. Now they were already far away from the three-way black market and were about to reach Northern Li. It was time to send out the blackmail. Uncle Cheng laughed coldly. "Jean Z, you don't understand Han Yunxi at all, do you?" Deacon Jean immediately sat up. "What do you mean?" "As far as I know, Han Yunxi was threatened by Yanqing once. He even threatened her with Gu Beiyue's life," Uncle Cheng said calmly. "What does that have to do with me? Tell her that if she still wants to see Mu Ling, she should immediately help me pay off my debt to Kangon Bank, then use the indenture contract to redeem her." Deacon Jean said coldly. "Jean Z, you still don't know about the relationship between Han Yunxi and manager Luo of Kangon Bank, right? Kangon Bank has already cooperated with Myriad Merchant Hall's casino. If Han Yunxi wants to fake a debt repayment, it's just a matter of saying a word. Moreover, you want her to use the indenture contract to redeem her. Aren't you afraid of her poison skills?" Uncle Cheng analyzed seriously. "Mu Ling is in my hands. I have a way to escape," Deacon Jean said unhappily. Uncle Cheng walked over and said in a low voice, "Deacon Jean, don't forget that Han Yunxi doesn't have the final say in the D clan. Ning Cheng is the true master." Deacon Jean suddenly said angrily, "Do you think I don't know that Ning Cheng's whereabouts are unknown? If Ning Cheng was here, he wouldn't have fallen into Han Yunxi's hands." It was Ning Cheng who had asked him to put Mu Ling under house arrest. Uncle Cheng carefully took out a letter from his sleeve. Deacon Jean glanced at the handwriting on the letter and was shocked. If that wasn't Ning Cheng's handwriting, then what could it be? "You have Ning Cheng's whereabouts? What's going on?" Deacon Jean asked anxiously. Although he and Ning Cheng were both friends and enemies, their friendship was more important than their hostility. He believed that Ning Cheng wouldn't sit idly by and do nothing about his fate today. "Just come with me. I guarantee that you'll definitely be able to see Master Ning. As for whether Master Ning will help you or not, that will depend on your friendship," Uncle Cheng said with a smile. Deacon Jean realized that he had been tricked by Uncle Cheng. It turned out that Uncle Cheng had asked him to kidnap Mu Ling and Ning Jing not to extort Han Yunxi, but to have other motives. What was the relationship between the D clan and Han Yunxi, the Western Qin princess? Ning Cheng was so loyal, but why did he treat Han Yunxi's younger sister Mu Ling like this? He couldn't care less about Western Qin's domestic affairs, nor was he interested. He only wanted to repay his debt and regain his freedom. "Okay, I'll go with you," Deacon Jean readily agreed. Uncle Cheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. When he came up with the idea of kidnapping, he was forced into a corner. Originally he only wanted to make things difficult for Han Yunshi, who knew that he would fall deeper and deeper, placing himself in the position of a traitor. If he had temporarily deceived Deacon Jean and let Han Yunshi have something on him, his fate would have been unimaginable. He hadn't thought about what to do next. However, he hadn't gone far from the three-way black market when his confidant delivered Ning Cheng's secret letter. This letter saved him and also pointed out a path for him. Ning Cheng's eyes were injured by Han Yunshi, but the letter said that he was fine in Northern Li. He couldn't help but suspect that Ning Cheng and Jun Yixia were working together. No matter what the truth was, this trip to Northern Li was a good opportunity to persuade Ning Cheng. He had already told Ning Cheng that Han Yunshi didn't deserve to be Western Qin's princess, and even more so, she didn't deserve the D clan's loyalty. With Ning Cheng's ability and military strength, if he cooperated with Jun Yixia, it would be enough to contend with Long Fei Yi. At least they could get half the world. Why should he be foolishly loyal to Western Qin and be beaten black and blue by Han Yunshi? Thinking of this, Uncle Cheng secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he knew Ning Cheng's whereabouts. Otherwise, he would be the only traitor in the history of the D clan. Just as the two of them were talking, Mu Linger suddenly shouted from the carriage, "Someone come! Someone come!" As soon as she shouted, Deacon Jean immediately looked over. Uncle Cheng heard it but didn't pay much attention. "What's wrong with her now?" Deacon Jean asked impatiently. "Don't worry about her. She'll stop shouting when she's tired." Uncle Cheng planned to ignore her. Deacon Jean didn't say anything and got up to go over. Uncle Cheng immediately stopped him. "I'll go. See how I deal with her. She's a woman after all, and a pregnant one at that. You should restrain yourself." Deacon Jean said indifferently. "Hehe Jeanzi, when did you become so soft-hearted? You're in this state today because of that stinky girl." Uncle Cheng laughed. "That stinky girl is worth more than Ning Jing. I'm only giving face for the sake of money." Deacon Jean lay back down. Uncle Cheng shrugged and strode towards the carriage. Who knew that as soon as he arrived, Mu Linger would shout that she wanted to use the outhouse. "Take care of it yourself in the carriage. Don't play tricks with me," Uncle Cheng said coldly. "I'm not going to the outhouse. Hurry up and take me down. I can't hold it in any more. You're a man. Don't tell me you can't control a woman like me." Mu Linger said and immediately changed her words. "No, you can't look. I'm begging you. I'll take care of it in the bushes at the side. Even if I run away, you can still chase after me, right?" Mu Linger clutched her stomach. She was so anxious that her facial features were all squeezed together. All right. Uncle Cheng helped Mu Linger untie her feet and let her get off the carriage. Mu Linger looked like she couldn't hold it in any longer. She quickly ran into the bushes. Uncle Cheng shouted, "Don't run too far." Very quickly, Mu Linger squatted down in the bushes, only revealing her head. Uncle Cheng glanced at her and waited by the carriage. Inside the carriage, Ning Jing was filled with anxiety. She only hoped that everything would go smoothly on Mu Linger's side. She and Mu Linger tore their handkerchiefs and inner linings of their dresses into strips. They bit their fingers and used their blood to write a cry for help. Mu Linger had already peeked in the carriage earlier. There were many herbs on both sides of the road, and there were signs that they had been picked. As long as they hid the strips of cloth beside the herbs, they would definitely be seen by the people picking the herbs. Mu Linger seemed to have picked a random spot, but she had actually picked a spot with the most herbs. Uncle Cheng waited for a moment and urged, "Are you done?" Mu Linger didn't dare to delay. She hurriedly tied the strips of cloth to the roots of the herbs and hurried back. "Thank you," she said politely. She didn't show any signs of panic when faced with Uncle Cheng's scrutiny. Uncle Cheng sized her up and didn't find anything strange. He said coldly, "Get in the carriage." Mu Linger heaved a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, when she got in the carriage, Uncle Cheng's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a torn corner of her dress. "Wait," Uncle Cheng said angrily. Mu Linger's heart raced, but she still tried very hard to calm herself down. She got out of the carriage and asked, "What's the matter?" Uncle Cheng suddenly grabbed her and strode into the bushes. Mu Linger knew that she couldn't escape, so she lowered her eyes and let Uncle Cheng pull her. Soon, Uncle Cheng saw the strips of cloth tied to the herbs. He untied one strip and took a look. He was instantly furious. "Good, you brat. You're so smart." Uncle Cheng threw away the strip of cloth and suddenly grabbed Mu Linger's hair. Chapter 938. Uncle Cheng grabbed Mu Linger by her hair and pushed her to the ground. Mu Linger did not expect that the black-robed elder would attack a woman. She was frightened and turned to flee. "Damn girl, you don't know what's good for you." Uncle Ching chased after her and grabbed Mu Linger's arm. Mu Linger screamed in fright, closing her eyes and struggling for her life. However, she soon heard a cold voice. "Let go." Almost at the same time, she felt a large, warm hand press down on her shoulder. She looked up and saw that the person was none other than the masked young man. "This damned girl left a secret signal for help," Uncle Ching said angrily. He was so angry because Mu Linger had written the words "Traitor of Myriad Merchant Hall" on the note. Uncle Ching hated this title and thought that he had never wanted to be a traitor. He had been forced to take this step. He was going to find Ning Ching now. He had not betrayed the D clan. Deacon Jean looked down at Mu Linger and asked coldly, "How many secret signals did you leave? Tell me the truth." "Right here, right here." Mu Linger blinked her large, teary eyes and looked pitiful. She did not know why, but she had a feeling that this young man would not make things too difficult for her. "Let go of her. Go pack up and leave immediately," Deacon Jean said calmly to Uncle Ching. Uncle Ching snorted disdainfully. "You can't believe this damn girl's words. If you don't interrogate her properly, she won't tell the truth. Who knows how many secret signals she left along the way." I just left them here. I won't dare to do it again. I beg you, let me go. I really won't dare to do it again," Mu Linger hurriedly begged. She tried her best to break free from Black Costume Old Man's grip, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't. That old thing was grabbing her wrist so hard that it hurt. Uncle Cheng looked coldly at Deacon Jean and said fiercely, "Don't interfere. I have my ways to make her tell the truth." However, Deacon Jin's attitude was firm. "She's mine. I'll be the one to interrogate her." "You?" Uncle Cheng was exasperated. However, seeing the determination in Deacon Jin's eyes, he finally gave in. He was still on the run. He and Deacon Jean were in the same boat. He didn't want to fall out with him at this time. Compared to Ning Jing, Mu Linger was indeed more valuable. If Ning Ching saw Mu Linger as a bargaining chip, he would definitely be very satisfied. Uncle Cheng fiercely shook off his hand and went to deal with the bloody words left behind by Mu Linger. Seeing the masked old man walk away, Mu Linger immediately avoided the big hand on her shoulder. "That hero, I really only left the secret signal here. I won't dare to do it again. Please let me go." Deacon Jean glanced at her wrist that was bruised from the grip. He looked down and quickly found that there were blood stains on her skirt. He was shocked. Your child?" Mu Linger looked down and saw the blood stains. Only then did she realize that she was pretending to be pregnant. That push just now should have affected the fetus. She immediately pretended to be panicked. She and Deacon Jean looked at each other for a while, then looked down and slowly lifted her skirt. Deacon Jean had never encountered such a situation before. He didn't understand at all. Seeing Mu Linger lift her skirt, he looked on nervously, not realizing that he was being indecent. However, when Mu Linger lifted her skirt to her knees, he instantly breathed a sigh of relief. He saw that Mu Linger's knees were bruised and bleeding a lot. Mu Linger glanced at Deacon Jean and pretended to rejoice. She let out a long breath. Fortunately. She had never been pregnant before and didn't know what it felt like to be pregnant. Based on her understanding, she touched her flat belly and said in a choked voice, "Child, mother has let you down. Woo, you must be fine. You're stronger than mother." After a false alarm, Deacon Jean became irritated again. He said coldly, "If there's nothing else, then go back to the carriage. Hand over all the cloth strips you've hidden." Deacon Jean wasn't stupid. He wanted to know if Mu Linger and the others had left cloth strips in other places. He only needed to find the ones in the grass and the ones in their hands. If they weren't complete, for example, they were left in other places. Besides using handkerchiefs to tear cloth strips, these two women could only tear the corners of their skirts. It was very easy to piece them together. Mu Linger gritted her teeth and nodded pitifully. Before she left, Deacon Jean turned around and left first. She actually wanted to thank him. Her woman's intuition told her that this young man still took good care of her. Deacon Jean walked far away. He looked back and saw Mu Linger slowly limping away. He hesitated for a moment, then turned back. "Hero, you..." Before Mu Linger could finish her words, Deacon Jean picked her up and walked towards the carriage. "Thank you," Mu Linger said in a low voice. She didn't know if Deacon Jean heard her, but he didn't say a word. Seeing that they were about to reach the carriage, Deacon Jean suddenly turned and walked towards a big tree with Mu Linger in his arms. Could it be that this guy regretted it and wanted to interrogate her? Mu Linger felt uneasy. Deacon Jean put her down under the tree and let her sit against the trunk. Then he asked coldly, "Do you have medicine?" Mu Linger didn't react for a moment and asked, "What medicine?" Deacon Jin's eyes flashed with displeasure. He didn't answer her and suddenly leaned closer. Mu Linger pushed him away reflexively. What are you doing? Deacon Jin fell to the ground, and his sullen eyes became even angrier. He still didn't speak. He got up and approached Mu Linger again. What are you doing? Go away. Don't touch me. Get lost. Mu Linger shouted, but Deacon Jin grabbed her hand so that she couldn't struggle. Mu Linger stretched out her leg and was about to kick him when Deacon Jin took out a few bottles of medicine from the small cloth bag that she always carried around with her. At this moment, Mu Linger quieted down. She realized that she had misunderstood. Deacon Jin picked out a bottle of medicine and said coldly, "Leg." Mu Linger finally understood that he wanted to help her apply the medicine. She carefully took out another bottle. This one is more effective. Deacon Jin was about to take it, but Mu Linger avoided him and said timidly, I can apply it myself. Just now. I'm sorry. Deacon Jin snorted softly but still didn't speak. Mu Linger hesitated for a moment and said softly, can you leave for a while? She had lifted her skirt just now to prove that she didn't have a miscarriage, lest this man really called the doctor. Now that she wanted to apply the medicine, he naturally had to leave. How could she let others see her legs so casually? Since Mu Linger had spoken so bluntly, Deacon Jin naturally understood what she meant. He immediately turned his back and sat in front of her. Mu Linger was relieved and carefully lifted her skirt. Both her knees were bloody from the fall. It really hurt. Luckily it was hidden under her skirt. Otherwise it would have been ugly. The surroundings were quiet. Deacon Jin and Mu Linger sat in front of each other. Mu Linger was sure that she was a valuable hostage and that this young kidnapper wouldn't hurt her. She forgot about her earlier fear and focused on her wound. Deacon Jin lowered his head. His fine fringe covered his eyes, and in the darkness, his eyes were dark. He was silent for a while. Suddenly, he turned around and looked at Mu Linger's well-proportioned and fair calves. He said sarcastically, Mu Linger, you're so casual. Do you mind being seen by others? Mu Linger was stunned. She immediately covered her skirt and said angrily, What do you mean? Deacon Jin snorted coldly. You can even do something like getting pregnant before marriage and you're still afraid of others seeing your legs? What are you pretending for? Mu Linger was immediately angry, but she suppressed it. I'm casual with Chi brother. No one else can do it. Deacon Jin's gaze turned cold. He scolded, You're so cheap. Mu Linger had never scolded him like that before. She said provocatively, I like it. What does it have to do with you? Do I need you to meddle in other people's business? Deacon Jin seemed to want to say something, but he didn't. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Mu Linger's words stopped him in his tracks. Mu Linger said, Hey, you're Deacon Jin, aren't you? No, Deacon Jin replied calmly. You are. You must be. I can't be wrong. Mu Linger insisted. Deacon Jin didn't intend to pay attention to her, but Mu Linger said, That old man is from Myriad Merchant Hall, right? Who is he? Do you know that you've been tricked by him? Although Deacon Jin didn't answer, he didn't walk forward either. There was no doubt that this was the emotional drama he had told Mu Linger about. Seeing this, Mu Linger hurriedly said, Deacon Jin, you kidnapped me just to threaten my sister to help you pay off your debt, right? You didn't intend to kidnap Ning Jing, did you? Mu Linger continued, Think about it. Why would that old man kidnap Ning Jing for no reason? He has selfish motives. He's trying to clear himself of suspicion and throw all the blame on you. But everyone in Myriad Merchant Hall knows that kidnapping Ning Jing won't threaten the D clan or anything. That's why he brought Ning Jing out on purpose. He's creating an illusion to clear himself of suspicion. He's taking you all the way north now. You don't even know that you've been used by him. Of course, all of this had been analyzed by Ning Jing. Otherwise, given Mu Linger's understanding of Myriad Merchant Hall, she wouldn't have thought that it was so deep. Uncle Cheng did indeed have such intentions when he kidnapped Ning Jing. He didn't want to leave any stain on Myriad Merchant Hall's reputation. But he never expected that Jia Dai would give him 100 million taels and betray him so thoroughly. As for Ning Jing, how would she know so much? Until now, she was only certain that there was a traitor in the D clan, but she couldn't guess who it was. Deacon Jin turned to look at her. Ning Jing told you, didn't she? Deacon Jin could more or less see through Uncle Cheng's scheme. However, Ning Cheng's handwritten letter confirmed his decision to meet Ning Cheng instead of blackmailing Han Yunxi. You admitted it? Mu Linger exclaimed. Deacon Jin avoided her gaze. Ning Jing is wrong. I'm not Jin Zi. You are. Mu Linger said anxiously. Deacon Jean, I'll sell all the things I won from the auction and exchange them for money for you. If it's not enough, I'll think of a way to pay for it. Let us go, all right? I swear on my life that I'll definitely convince my sister to return the indenture contract to you. Deacon Jean stood up, clearly uninterested. Deacon Jean, I'll be honest with you. My sister has already taken control of Myriad Merchant Hall. Ning Cheng's whereabouts are unknown. Now, other than my sister, no one can help pay off his debt, much less return your indenture contract. Don't believe that old man. I'm not lying to you. Mu Linger said seriously. Han Yunshi has taken control of Myriad Merchant Hall? Deacon Jean was shocked. Chapter 939. Mu Linger had no idea that Deacon Jean was heading north to find Ning Cheng. Seeing Deacon Jean's shock, she thought she had a chance and quickly added, Deacon Jean, you should know what Myriad Merchant Hall means to the D clan. I won't lie to you about this. If you don't believe me, you can ask Ning Jing yourself. My big sis helped Myriad Merchant Hall deal with the gambling houses and auction houses, so all of the elders are wholeheartedly convinced of her abilities. A complicated look flickered past Deacon Jin's eyes. If Han Yunshi controlled Myriad Merchant Hall, then what about Ning Cheng? If there was a rift between Han Yunshi and Ning Cheng, then the D clan would definitely listen to Ning Cheng. After all, Ning Cheng was the clan head. Deacon Jean didn't tell Uncle Cheng about this. After checking all the strips of cloth and making sure there were no mistakes, they hurried through the night towards northern Lee's Sky River City. But the next day they heard news that Eastern and Western Qin were actually working together. Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi had joined forces to denounce the Bai clan and challenge the 100 Poisons sect. They wanted the Bai clan to clarify whether the civil war between Eastern and Western Qin had been East Qin's fault, or Western Qin's. The ones who spread the news were none other than the D clan's Myriad Merchant Hall Council of Elders. Only now did Deacon Jean believe Mu Linger's words. Ning Cheng must know about this too, Deacon Jean probed. Han Yunshi's caught herself in a trap of her own making. Don't you worry, Ning Cheng won't let her off. Uncle Cheng said coldly. Mu Linger and Ning Jing were trapped in the carriage, so they didn't hear the news. If Ning Jing did, she'd probably be happy. Myriad Merchant Hall had spread the news throughout Cloud Realm continent, so Jun Yixia had long received the news. With a loud bang, Jun Yixia threw a secret letter in front of Ning Cheng. This secret report was about the elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the deputy generals of the Ning clan troops rushing towards the 100 Poisons sect. Ning Cheng casually flipped through it and said coldly, Isn't that perfect? I'll get rid of Bai Yanqing for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Jun Yixia clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He would never allow anyone to mention the matter between him and his master. Bai Yuqiao was afraid of him, but Ning Cheng was not. He snorted, Jun Yixia, you should be glad that Bai Yanqing did not come to Beili, otherwise you would be very pitiful. Enough. Jun Yixia flipped over the letter on the table and raged, Ning Cheng, Han Yunshi controls your D-clan's purse. What are you going to use to cooperate with me? This was Jun Yixia's main concern. Ning Cheng was unruffled. This clan head will always have the final say in the D-clan. Haven't you already reported your safety? Why didn't the Council of Elders inform you of such an important decision? Jun Yixia pressed closer to Ning Cheng and demanded. Ning Cheng slowly pushed him aside. Jun Yixia, I was kidnapped by Bai Yuqiao. As long as they search the ruins of Black Tower, they'll be able to guess it. What do you think they'll believe with a single letter before confirming my safety? Jun Yixia seemed to realize something and his expression changed. Ning Cheng coldly said, Jun Yixia, if the 30,000 cavalrymen head south, the entire D clan will believe that I'm safe. Otherwise, they'd rather listen to Han Yunshi than a letter of unknown origin. You won't get a single copper coin. You're threatening me? Jun Yixia raged. Yes. Ning Cheng admitted generously. Don't forget that your life is in my hands. Jun Yixia said sternly. You can kill me. Ning Cheng looked indifferent. With Jun Yixia's personality, if he could kill him, he would have done so long ago. Kill you? I can't afford to kill you. Your life is worth at least 1 billion. Jun Yixia's words implied that he wanted to use Ning Cheng to threaten the D clan. If you think it's worth it, you can try. Ning Cheng was as calm as Mount Tai. The news of Han Yunshi and Long Fei Ye's cooperation was a huge help to him. The cooperation between Eastern and Western Qin would make Ning Cheng desperate. The reason why he wrote a letter to Uncle Cheng was because Uncle Cheng was usually dissatisfied with Han Yunshi and repeatedly instigated him to betray Western Qin's imperial family. Han Yunshi hurt his eyes, and he only wrote one sentence in the letter, which was enough to arouse Uncle Cheng's suspicion. If he didn't gamble wrong, Uncle Cheng wouldn't tell anyone in the D clan his whereabouts. Instead, he would personally come to find him and persuade him to cooperate with Jun Yixie. With Uncle Cheng helping him put on an act, it would be easier to win Jun Yixie's trust. Jun Yixie was indeed anxious. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Ning Cheng. Ning Cheng sat down on the side and said indifferently, "I don't mind telling you that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi still have feelings for each other. That woman has long ignored the cause of reviving the empire. The grudges between Eastern and Western Qin can't stop her. Instead, Myriad Merchant Hall's Elder Council will be led by the nose by her. Jun Yixie, you don't have much time. Think it over." Jun Yixie finally understood that Ning Cheng was gambling with the entire D clan. If he gave up the 30,000 warhorses, Ning Cheng would immediately appear to take back the D clan's authority. If he didn't, Ning Cheng would rather give the D clan to Han Yunxi than cooperate with him. In the end, Ning Cheng wanted him to give the 30,000 warhorses to the D clan first and then give him military pay and provisions. Originally, they had agreed to hand over the money and the warhorses. Jun Yixie was naturally on guard against Ning Cheng holding back, but he didn't expect such an unforeseen event to happen in just a few days. How did Han Yunxi control Myriad Merchant Hall's Elder Council? How did she persuade the D clan to cooperate with Long Fei Yi? After not seeing her for a long time, that woman's ability had grown. Hand over the warhorses first, then take the military pay and provisions. Jun Yixie muttered in his letter. He was also weighing whether or not he could take this risk. He was also weighing how much of Ning Cheng's attitude was true and how much was false. Jun Yixie didn't immediately reply to Ning Cheng. Instead, he said coldly, "Just wait. I'll think it over." After Jun Yixie left the camp, he saw Bai Yuqiao walking towards him. Bai Yuqiao had talked to him about his master a few times recently. Whenever he saw Bai Yuqiao, he would feel vexed. However, he still asked coldly, "Has Su Xiaoyu confessed?" "Not yet. That girl is too stubborn," Bai Yuqiao said truthfully. She had interrogated Su Xiaoyu quite a bit these days. Naturally, she wanted to know the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion. There are plenty of extreme punishments in the horse farm. "What, you still can't get anything out of her?" Jun Yixie asked. "Senior brother, if that girl dies, we really won't be able to get anything out of her. Besides, Han Yunxi treats the people around her well. That girl has been with her for so long. She can be considered a hostage," Bai Yuqiao analyzed seriously. These words reminded Jun Yixie that if he couldn't come to an agreement with Ning Cheng, he might be able to use Su Xiaoyu to make a fuss. At this moment, his mind was in a mess. He didn't think too much about it and left in a huff. Bai Yuqiao looked at Jun Yixie's back and began to worry. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had teamed up to challenge 100 Poison's sect. Would her senior brother rush over to help? Han Yunxi's poison skills were profound and unfathomable. She was a match for her master, while Long Fei Yi's martial arts were probably the best in Cloud Realm. If the two of them teamed up, her master would have no chance of winning. 100 Poison's sect would be in danger. With her master's crafty personality, he might not show himself. Moreover, her senior brother had deep feelings for 100 Poison's sect. If her master didn't go and her senior brother did, then wouldn't that be? Bai Yuqiao didn't dare to think any further. She told herself that she had to keep a close eye on her senior brother for the next few days no matter what. She didn't want him to do something he would regret. Bai Yuqiao was about to follow him when a soldier hurried over to report, "Miss Yu, something has happened to the hostage in the prison." "What's going on?" Bai Yuqiao was alarmed. The person feeding her wasn't paying attention and that girl hit her head on the ground. The doctor has already rushed over to save her. The soldier replied truthfully. "Damn it." Bai Yuqiao immediately went to the prison cell. When she arrived, Su Xiaoyu was unconscious and the doctor was treating the wound on her forehead. After Su Xiaoyu was kidnapped, she hadn't said a word or drank a drop of water. She only wanted to die. Not only could Bai Yuqiao not do anything to her, she even had to be careful to prevent her from committing suicide. Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. How could this girl be so stubborn and ruthless at such a young age? Was she really not afraid of death? After the doctor finished treating the wound, Bai Yuqiao had everyone withdraw. She guarded Su Xiaoyu alone, quietly pondering what method she could use to make this girl betray Han Yunxi. She had long sent people to investigate her background. If they could find out about it and find her relatives, perhaps they could threaten her. It was a pity that there wasn't any effective information until now. Orphans were like barefooted people. They wouldn't be afraid of anyone wearing shoes. Bai Yuqiao understood this feeling of having no scruples and being fearless too well, because she was also an orphan. She was able to feed the whole family and had no worries. Therefore she was fearless and was willing to risk everything. Han Yunxi's feelings towards Su Xiaoyu were the same as her senior brother's feelings towards her. She was the only person she cared about and was willing to risk everything for. Thinking of this, Bai Yuqiao couldn't help but think, what if one day she found her long-lost younger sister? Would her younger sister replace Ning Cheng's position? She didn't continue thinking about it and summoned the soldiers to watch over her. Watch over her carefully. If anything happens again, be careful of your little lives. After she finished instructing them, she went to senior brother's tent. Since last night, she had been secretly hiding outside and keeping watch for the entire night. There were still 7 days before Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi challenged 100 Poisons sect. Bai Yuqiao was going to have a lot to endure. At this moment, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were still hurrying through the night. Myriad Merchant Hall had already spread the news. She and Long Fei Yi had also written a letter of challenge and sent it to 100 Poisons sect. Everything was ready except for the east wind. Long Fei Yi, do you think Bai Yanqing has already brought Gu Beiyue to 100 Poisons sect? Han Yunxi asked excitedly. She couldn't wait to reach 100 Poisons sect immediately and truly join forces with Long Fei Yi to beat Bai Yanqing to a pulp. Long Fei Yi lazily raised a hand to rub Han Yunxi's head. He seemed to be in a good mood as he smiled. If he tries the same trick again, will you fall for it again? Last time at Tianning's Imperial Palace, she and Ning Cheng had already captured Bai Yanqing. Unfortunately, she wasn't ruthless enough. Even though they had the same chips, Bai Yanqing had used Gu Beiyue to threaten her, so she'd compromised. When the chips were equal, it was a contest of patience. Han Yunxi had never lost before, but she'd lost to Bai Yanqing once. With you here, I won't fall for it, Han Yunxi said seriously. She believed that Long Fei Yi was ruthless and steady enough. She also believed that Long Fei Yi wouldn't be like Ning Cheng and sacrifice Gu Beiyue. She was looking forward to Long Fei Yi and Bai Yanqing's negotiations. Long Fei Yi laughed out loud. Han Yunxi, let me tell you some good news. Do you want to hear it? Chapter 940. Han Yunxi could clearly feel that Long Fei Yi was in a very good mood. Even if Tang Li found Ning Jing and Mu Ling'er, Long Fei Yi wouldn't have much of a reaction. What good news could make Long Fei Yi laugh so heartily at this time? Han Yunxi really couldn't think of anything. Han Yunxi smiled slyly and answered, I don't want to hear it. Don't say it. Long Fei Yi was in a good mood today. He originally wanted to whet Han Yunxi's appetite, but he didn't expect to be defeated by Han Yunxi's words. He really wanted to say it and couldn't wait to share this good news with Han Yunxi. He didn't keep her in suspense and said directly, in 2 days Gu Beiyue will join us. Han Yunxi was stunned and muttered, who are you talking about? Gu Beiyue. Other than Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi rarely said a person's name so seriously. Han Yunxi widened her eyes in shock. Gu Beiyue? Gu Beiyue. God, did she hear wrongly? Gu Beiyue. Seeing Han Yunxi's shocked expression, Long Fei Yi calmed down and laughed loudly. It's Gu Beiyue. He was rescued by Gu and rushed over from Three-Way Black Market. He'll catch up with us in 2 days. Even though she heard it with her own ears, Han Yunxi still couldn't believe her ears. She couldn't sit still anymore. Looking at Long Fei Yi, she grabbed his hand excitedly. What's going on? Are you really not lying to me? Her heart was hanging in mid-air. She was really afraid that Long Fei Yi was playing with her. She couldn't bear such disappointment. Long Fei Yi smiled brightly. He took out a secret letter from the stack beside him and handed it to Han Yunxi. You should recognize his handwriting. Han Yunxi quickly opened the secret letter. However, what she saw was not Gu Beiyue's handwriting but Tang Li's. She was puzzled, but when she saw the contents of Tang Li's letter, she hurriedly read it and did not have time to ask more questions. Tang Li briefly explained how Gu had rescued Gu Beiyue, and how the 3 of them had met in East Origin Palace. In the end, he asked Gu to help him find Ning Jing and Mu Ling'er. Gu was secretly escorted by several experts. If she hadn't read the letter, Han Yunxi wouldn't have been so shocked. After reading the letter, she didn't know what to say. She never thought that it would be Gu who had rescued Gu Beiyue. Furthermore, he had avoided Bai Yanqing and directly rescued him from the mountain valley. Gu has performed a great service. Han Yunxi said very seriously. Yes. Although Long Fei Yi only replied with one word, he had acknowledged it. Gu had done so many things, but this was probably the only thing that Long Fei Yi would willingly nod his head in acknowledgement. Record his great service. Han Yunshi quickly spoke up for Gu. Gu Beiwei owes him. Long Fei Yi replied expressionlessly. In other words, he didn't owe Gu anything. If Long Fei Yi and Gu were incompatible, Han Yunshi would definitely believe it. She didn't have time to argue with him. She carefully checked the secret letter and asked nervously, "Where's Gu Beiwei's handwriting?" The letter that Tang Li sent to Long Fei Yi was brought over by the shadow guard, so it couldn't be fake. However, she felt uneasy when she didn't see the handwriting. On the back, Long Fei Yi said lightly. Han Yunshi immediately flipped the letter over and saw a familiar line of handwriting. It was clear and strong with a certain degree of curvature. The handwriting was like the person. Han Yunshi could tell at a glance that it was Gu Beiwei's handwriting. He only wrote one sentence. "Please wait for this subordinate to return and treat the princess's injuries. I hope the princess can stand on the battlefield." This subordinate hid his identity without permission. "I will ask for forgiveness when we meet." Han Yunshi read it over and over again. She couldn't help but giggle foolishly, then shook her head helplessly. It was so familiar. It had been so long. Even though they hadn't seen each other for months, even though the truth was out, Gu Beiwei was still so humble and gentle. He was still so calm. With just one sentence, she could almost see the gentle Dr. Gu standing in front of her, smiling warmly at her, just like how he was in the beginning. Seeing Han Yunshi giggling foolishly, Long Fei Yi pursed his lips. He suddenly reached out and took back the secret letter. He folded it and put it back quietly. Han Yunshi turned to look and inadvertently caught a glimpse of his face. She realized that he didn't seem as happy as before. Han Yunshi felt like saying something, but she didn't know what to say. Long Fei Yi was silent. It seemed like he had no intention of speaking. The two of them suddenly quieted down. An aura that hadn't appeared in a long time gradually spread between the two of them. It was sour. In the end, it was Han Yunshi who spoke first. Long Fei Yi, Long Fei Yi responded faintly. You. Han Yunshi wanted to say something but stopped. Long Fei Yi seemed to be quite willing to talk to her. Han Yunshi glanced at him and finally asked, "Long Fei Yi, are you hungry? Do you want to eat supper?" Long Fei Yi glanced at her. He didn't seem to expect her to ask this question, but he quickly answered, "You're hungry. What do you want to eat?" Han Yunshi timidly spat out 3 words, "It's all sour banquet." After saying that, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that she almost lost her image. At this time, Gu Beiwei's identity was already clear, but Long Fei Yi was still jealous. She really had to hand it to him. She wouldn't be satisfied if she didn't ask for a table full of sour banquet from him. Long Fei Yi was 30% embarrassed and 70% helpless. Looking at Han Yunshi, who was laughing so hard, he didn't know what to do with her. It wasn't the first time this woman had dared to mock and tease him. What could he do? Long Fei Yi simply called Su Donglin over. "How much longer until we reach the county?" "We'll reach it at daybreak." "Your Highness wants to stay in the county?" Su Donglin was puzzled. They had been on the road and hadn't stayed in the county for a long time. Long Fei Yi was about to speak when Han Yunshi quickly said, "It's fine. You can leave." Long Fei Yi wasn't going to rest in the county. He was really going to order a table full of sour banquet for her. Su Donglin waited a while but didn't hear a word from His Highness. He silently withdrew. He didn't understand the world between His Highness and the princess. Sometimes Su Donglin couldn't help but think of his former boss, Chu Shifeng. He hadn't heard from Celestial Mountain in ages, so he wondered how Boss Chu was doing after his martial arts were crippled. If only Boss Chu was still by His Highness's side serving him. "You're not eating anymore?" Long Fei asked mildly, as if nothing had happened at all during this meal. Han Yunshi also pretended nothing had happened and replied calmly, "I've gained weight recently, so it's better if I don't eat." "If you're hungry, don't hold it in." Long Fei Yi was clearly implying something else. Han Yunshi refused to be outdone. "I'm not hungry." "If you're hungry, don't hold it in. It'll be bad if you starve yourself to death." The two of them had a tacit understanding, but both were holding it in to see who would speak first. Long Fei Yi changed the subject. "It's getting late. I'll give you a massage, so you should sleep early. We're not done with business yet." "If Bai Yanqing doesn't have anyone on his hands, then?" Before Han Yunshi could finish, Long Fei had already sat down on one side and lifted her leg to rest on his thigh before massaging the sole of her foot. Han Yunshi couldn't help but feel nervous. Her leg would feel uncomfortable if it stayed in place for too long. In the later stages, she'd need massages to improve blood circulation and loosen her muscles and ligaments. Although it was supposed to be a foot massage, every time Long Fei Yi massaged her foot, it turned into a full-body exercise. His massages were excellent. A bit too light would make it itchy, while a bit too heavy would make it too hard. The strength was just right, making her feel very comfortable. If Han Yunxi wasn't nervous, this would be a rare pleasure in the world. Unlike in the past where they chatted while massaging, Long Feiyi was very quiet at this time. Han Yunxi could only discuss business with him tomorrow. Unexpectedly, after a while, Long Feiyi said to Uncle Gao, "Turn around and head back to meet up with Gu Beiyue." Han Yunxi stared at him in disbelief. "Let's walk slower. He'll catch up. Don't be so tormented." She couldn't move, so they could only take a carriage. Gu Beiyue chased after them on horseback, so his speed was naturally much faster than theirs. The sooner your leg heals, the sooner it's healed. It doesn't matter how much you torment it, Long Feiyi said mildly. Han Yunxi looked at him and couldn't help but gently caress his face. She was full of words, but in the end she said gently, "I'll listen to you. As for 100 Poisons sect, we'll make further plans when we meet up with Gu Beiyue," Long Feiyi said. Han Yunxi nodded. Gu Beiyue wasn't in by Yanqing's hands, so they had an absolute chance of victory. Their letter of challenge had long reached 100 Poisons sect, so everyone in Cloud Realm continent knew about it. Bai Yanqing wouldn't be such a coward. Even if he didn't accept the challenge, they didn't mind taking 100 Poisons sect under their wing. As they chatted, Han Yunxi suddenly discovered a problem in the letter and exclaimed, "Long Feiyi, in other words, the true master behind Golden Wing Hall is Gu. No wonder Gu was so generous with his money and filled Cloud Realm continent with tea houses and estates. In the end, it was all thanks to Gu Qishao that these two troublesome events had happened. Long Feiyi didn't even care about Myriad Merchant Hall, much less the third-ranked Golden Wing Hall and three-way black market. He focused on massaging Han Yunxi without saying a word. What would Gu's expression look like when he found out she was the one who'd helped Myriad Merchant Hall settle those two storms? That devastatingly beautiful face would definitely stiffen. Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What are you laughing at?" Long Feiyi asked. "Nothing." Han Yunxi didn't dare to tell the truth. Long Feiyi looked at her seriously, so Han Yunxi could only beat around the bush. "I'm happy. I'll be able to stand up soon." That was a very reasonable reason. By now the foot massage was over as well. Long Feiyi carefully moved her legs aside. Han Yunxi couldn't resist sneaking a glance at him. What a rare sight, this guy didn't push his luck this time. But Long Feiyi quickly leaned over and asked in a low voice, "You're not tired, are you?" She was indeed overthinking things. There was no exception when it came to foot massages. However, unlike before, Han Yunxi could clearly feel Long Feiyi's domineering strength this time. It was especially domineering. She felt like her body was about to be penetrated and her soul was about to be crushed. Although he was rude and unreasonable, she was willing to endure it and even snickered. He was clearly the one who changed the topic of the sour banquet, but he was clearly warning her with his actions, punishing her and retaliating against her. She was the only one who could truly understand just how much of a man Long Fei was. Soon Han Yunxi couldn't think too much. That man's domineering strength forced her body and soul to follow his rhythm, gradually tensing up. It was as if something was imprisoning her, waiting for the opening to open. Chapter 941. Faced with a man of action, Han Yunxi couldn't think too much. His tyrannical strength forced her body and soul to follow his rhythm, gradually tightening as if something was imprisoning her, waiting for the opening to open. After the opening opened, she slowly opened her mouth and exhaled a long breath. Her entire body relaxed. She chuckled. "Long Feiyi, you win again." Long Fei knelt down, his forehead covered in sweat as he lay soundlessly over the bite mark on her chest. Han Yunxi gently hugged him and said in a low voice, "Long Feiyi, don't doubt me. I'll only love you in this lifetime." "What about the next lifetime?" Long Feiyi asked indifferently. Han Yunxi took his hand and stroked the scar on her chest. She didn't say anything about the next lifetime. Instead, she said seriously, "When I've loved enough in this lifetime, I'll tell you." "Okay." Long Feiyi agreed without hesitation. In this lifetime, he probably wouldn't tell Han Yunxi that the Shadow Clan's protection had two meanings. That night, they stubbornly turned back the way they came. The next evening, they arrived at Anmin Town, an ancient town in the eastern part of western Zhou. Long Feiyi booked a hot spring tea house in the western suburbs of Anmin Town to stay and wait for Gu Beiyue to arrive. Originally, Gu Beiyue would need 2 days to catch up with them, but because they turned back the way they came, the meeting time was shortened by half. Therefore, Gu Beiyue would arrive late at night. Han Yunxi was attracted by the hot spring that was emitting white steam as soon as she arrived at the hot spring tea house. It was already early winter and the weather in the northwest was already cold. However, it wasn't too cold outside. This was the best time to soak in the hot spring. Unfortunately, her leg was injured and she couldn't soak in it. Such a big hot spring wasn't a small bathtub for her to cross her legs outside. Long Fei Yi and she lived in the largest courtyard in the tea house. The house was surrounded by tatami mats and short tea bushes. Ning Jing was very happy. Being in this place, no matter how impetuous one's heart was, it would subconsciously calm down. But Han Yunxi could not calm down at all, because Long Fei Yi was soaking in the hot spring pool in the courtyard, and she was sitting at the tea table by the shore watching, unable to get down. Ever since her legs were seriously injured, she hadn't been able to soak in a hot spring properly. Whenever she closed her eyes, she would unconsciously imagine the relaxing and leisurely feeling of soaking in a hot spring. If she could get into the pool now, she would definitely sleep until dawn. However, she could only look on enviously. Soon Long Fei Yi swam over from the pool. He lay on the shore and splashed a handful of water at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi pretended not to see it and continued to make tea. However, she only made tea and did not drink it. Long Fei Yi smiled and splashed another handful of water over. The strength was just right, and the water only splashed at Han Yunxi's feet and did not wet her. Han Yunxi still pretended not to see it and she pushed the wheelchair to leave. "Where are you going?" Long Fei Yi immediately asked. "For a walk." Han Yunxi answered. "You're not going to accompany me?" Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunxi sighed and said, "Sigh, when Gu Beiwei comes, I'm afraid I'll only be able to enjoy the time in a wheelchair when I'm too old to walk. Of course, I have to cherish tonight. You soak by yourself, I'll walk around." As she spoke, she glanced back at Long Fei Yi and smiled. Under the moonlight, it was a different kind of charm. Long Fei Yi smiled helplessly. She could even come up with such a reason. He was convinced. Han Yunxi really left just like that. Long Fei Yi did not know that when she glanced back and smiled, she secretly glanced at his good figure. She was puzzled. Why did she not have the chance to seriously admire his sculpture-like perfect figure after being pampered by him so many times? Han Yunxi did not walk far before Long Fei Yi caught up with her. He was dressed in a loose and casual white robe and wooden clogs. He was very leisurely pushing her wheelchair. She looked back and smiled mischievously. "Not soaking anymore?" He deliberately looked at her enviously, and she naturally had a way to prevent him from getting his way. His gentle eyes were doting and helpless. Actually, there was no one who won or lost between them. They had always been evenly matched. The two of them strolled under the moonlight in the tea garden and chatted. "Tell me about what happened 3,000 years later," Long Fei Yi said lightly. Han Yunxi readily agreed. Of course, she only talked about happy things and did not mention the pain. Many times, people would have the illusion that time had healed the wounds and erased the scars. In reality, it was not time but the people brought by time. Han Yunxi finished talking about her own matters and did not ask about Long Fei Yi's childhood. She hoped that she was the person who was brought to Long Fei Yi by the reversal of time. Long Fei Yi was quite interested in the matter of her refusing to cut the queue for people with connections before she transmigrated. Ling Yun Hospital? Long Fei Yi pondered for a while and smiled. Then under what circumstances can you cut the queue? Depending on the illness? It depends on my mood. Han Yunxi laughed. Long Fei Yi also laughed. Chatting like this, Han Yunxi did not know how she fell asleep. She only vaguely remembered that Long Fei Yi carried her to the room. When she woke up, it was already the next morning and the sun was high in the sky. The pillow beside her was empty without any warmth. Obviously, Long Fei Yi was already up. She sat up, full of doubts. Why was she so sleepy? Yesterday, she had been sleeping in the carriage during the day. She thought that she could sleep through the night and wait for Gu Beiwei to come to see her. Who knew that she would unknowingly fall asleep last night? Although they had been on the road recently, the carriage was stable and not bumpy at all. Other than the needle technique, there was basically nothing to do. If it was in the past, she would cultivate the poison storage space. But now, she had to conserve her energy and did not cultivate for several days. Han Yunxi was in a daze but suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly took her pulse. She remembered that pregnant people would have a period of sleepiness. When it appeared, and the length of time varied from person to person. Unfortunately, her pulse quickly made her reject this idea. She laughed inwardly. That matter would not be so fast. She was afraid that she was too tired a while ago and relaxed during the journey. Her body automatically entered a period of recuperation. Han Yunxi did not think much about it. She quickly got out of bed and tidied up in a few seconds. The sky was bright. Gu Beiwei must have arrived. She called for a servant, but who knew that it was Bailey Mingxiang who came in? Bailey Mingxiang had always been reserved, but today, there was an obvious joy on her face that could not be hidden. Princess, you are finally awake. Dr. Gu has arrived. He is drinking tea with His Highness at Pine Fragrance Court. This servant has been ordered to bring you there. Bailey Mingxiang said with a smile. She had not been so happy in a long time. Han Yunxi was not surprised. Quickly, however, Bailey Mingxiang pushed her to the table and called for the servant girl waiting outside to bring in breakfast. Princess, eat your breakfast first. Dr. Gu's treatment will take a lot of time. You must eat until you are full. Bailey Mingxiang said. Han Yunxi was helpless. She thought that this must be Long Fei Ye's order. She could not refuse. However, when the servant girl brought in breakfast, she found that it was Bailey Mingxiang who was sitting for breakfast. These dishes were the ones she often ate at Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. There was no doubt that this meal was specially prepared for her by Bailey Mingxiang. It might not have been ordered by Long Fei Yi. Bailey Mingxiang helped her to a bowl of millet porridge and a pair of chopsticks. Princess must eat until you are full. If the treatment is delayed until the afternoon, you will be hungry. Han Yunxi suddenly had an illusion that she was back at Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. As soon as she sat at the table, Zhao Mama and Bailey Mingxiang came to serve her. Su Xiaoyu was outside the door watering the poisonous plants in the garden. Those days could never be returned. Bailey Mingxiang's future belonged to the army. Xiao Yuer's whereabouts were unknown. Xiao Yuer was still valuable in by Yu Qiao's hands. Therefore Xiao Yuer's life was not in danger. She only hoped that Xiao Yuer would be smarter and not so stubborn. She did not know if she could find out by Yu Qiao's whereabouts on this trip to 100 Poisons sect. Although she was anxious to see Gu Beiwei, Han Yunxi still ate seriously. Only when she was full did she ask Bailey Mingxiang to send her to Fragrant Pine Courtyard. When she arrived at the courtyard's entrance, she saw Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei talking at the tea table in the courtyard. Their voices were sometimes loud and sometimes deliberately lowered. She could not hear what they were talking about. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they did not notice Han Yunxi coming over. Bailey Mingxiang was about to speak when Han Yunxi stopped him. She looked at Gu Beiwei from afar. His white clothes were spotless and his expression was easygoing. Even if a stranger saw him, they would feel very comfortable as if they were old friends. Although they had not seen each other for a long time, Han Yunxi did not find him strange at all. He was still as intimate and at ease as before. It was as if they had never been separated by life and death at the cliff, as if he had always been there and had never left. There were not many people who could sit at Long Fei Yi's tea table and have Long Fei Yi personally pour tea for them. Gu was one of them. It was rare for Long Fei Yi to be so easygoing as well, chatting and laughing. Han Yunxi even forgot about her leg injury, not wanting to disturb this picturesque scene. But Long Fei Yi had long noticed her arrival. He quickly stopped talking with Gu Beiwei and arched a brow at her. You're still not coming over? Actually, Gu Beiwei had noticed her long ago as well. No matter how anxious he was to see Miss Yunxi, he would never speak up as long as Long Fei Yi did not speak. Only now did he turn to look. As soon as he saw Han Yunxi, the gentle curve of his lips widened. But even his smile was soundless. He quickly rose to his feet, as modest as he had been when they first met at General Mu's estate. But this time he didn't call her esteemed Wang Fei, but Your Highness Princess. This time he didn't clasp his hands in front of his chest, but knelt on his knees. This subordinate, Lone Moon, greets Your Highness Princess. He knelt on the ground and cupped his hands in greeting, kowtowing until his forehead rested on those warm, slender hands. He was a white cloud in the sky. But right now he was kneeling piously in the mud. But it wasn't just Han Yunxi. Even the lofty Long Fei Yi standing on the side didn't think he was lowly. Some people were just like that. Even if they were kneeling, they were still lofty and noble. Han Yunxi couldn't bear to see Gu Beiwei kneel, so she quickly said, Gu Beiwei, if you don't hurry and get up, I'm going to get angry. She told him for years not to be so courteous, but he'd knelt as soon as they met. After not seeing him for so long, she thought he'd be as excited and agitated as the rest of them, but he was still as calm as water, as warm as jade. She didn't know what to do with him. Han Yunxi couldn't help but wonder what could break Gu Beiwei's warmth and quiet. Chapter 942. Han Yunxi was angry, but Gu Beiwei still didn't get up. He said seriously, Your subordinate hid his identity and bullied my superior. Please punish me, princess. Han Yunshi already knew that it was useless to talk nonsense with him. She said fiercely, "Gu Beiwe, I'll punish you by treating my injuries. If I still can't walk today, do as you see fit." Gu Beiwe was about to speak when Han Yunshi stopped him. "This is an order. No more nonsense. Get up quickly." Gu Beiwe sighed softly and got up. "Don't worry, princess. You will definitely be able to walk before nightfall." Gu Beiwe's words could definitely be trusted. He helped Han Yunshi with acupuncture treatment in the bamboo hut in fragrant pine courtyard. For injuries like fractures, the bones had to grow back together before they could be considered healed. Acupuncture alone wouldn't have such a miraculous effect. Gu Beiwe not only used needles but medicine as well. He used acupuncture and moxibustion to bring out the effects of the medicine. In the end, it was the medicine that had taken effect. Of course, only he could use the medicine so quickly. For others, it wouldn't be effective for at least half a month. Han Yunshi's injuries had been recuperating for some time. She could even stand stably, so it wasn't difficult for Gu Beiwe. The room was silent. Han Yunshi was lying down. Gu Beiwe was focused on performing acupuncture, asking her a few questions from time to time. Long Feiyi sat beside Han Yunshi watching and watching. Time flew by quickly. There was no rest in the middle. When Gu Beiwe finished the entire set of acupuncture, it was already evening. "Princess, you can leave now." Gu Beiwe didn't even say the word try, and directly let Han Yunshi leave. He packed up the medicine box and retreated behind the screen, not even looking at Han Yunshi's bare calf. Although she knew that she could recover, Han Yunshi couldn't help but feel excited when she really recovered. She unconsciously grabbed Long Feiyi's hand and looked at him. Long Feiyi was actually more nervous than her. He picked her up. Han Yunshi immediately said, "I want to walk." Long Feiyi carefully put her down but didn't let go of her hand. Han Yunshi looked at him, broke free from his hand and took a step forward. She didn't know if it was because she hadn't walked normally for a long time, but this step seemed a little rusty. Han Yunshi took another step, and Long Feiyi chased after her to prevent her from falling. The second step was still unfamiliar. Han Yunshi threw caution to the wind and took a few steps forward with Long Fei following closely behind. Just like this, the two of them walked around the room, went around the screen and turned in from the other side. Gu Beiwe watched, smiled quietly and left silently, closing the door behind him. Soon he heard Han Yunshi's surprised voice behind him. "I can walk. Long Feiyi, I can walk." Long Fei must have picked her up, because Han Yunshi couldn't help but laugh loudly. Gu Beiwe listened without turning back or stopping. When he reached the courtyard's entrance, he instructed Su Donglin, "When His Highness comes out later, tell him that the princess's injury has just recovered. Don't walk too much in the next 3 to 4 days. She still needs to recuperate." Su Donglin was overjoyed. "The princess's leg injury is really healed." Gu Beiwe nodded and was about to leave when Long Feiyi's surprised voice suddenly came from the courtyard. "Gu Beiwe! Gu Beiwe!" If it was someone else shouting like this, perhaps Gu Beiwe would still be calm. But Long Feiyi shouting like this, it was definitely a big matter. Su Donglin had not yet recovered his senses when Gu Beiwe disappeared in front of him. His internal injury had just recovered. With only 20% of his internal energy left, he used the shadow technique. The shadow technique consumed a lot of internal energy. Using it like this, only God knew how many days he would need to recuperate to recover. His gentle calmness could be broken in an instant. Unfortunately, Han Yunshi could not see it because Han Yunshi had fainted. When Gu Beiwe barged into the room, he saw Long Feiyi sitting on the floor, and Han Yunshi unconscious in his arms. They were walking well just now. Long Feiyi was only on guard against Han Yunshi falling. He did not expect her to suddenly fall unconscious. While listening to Long Feiyi's explanation, he also took Han Yunshi's pulse. Gu Beiwe's brows were tightly knitted. His already pale face turned even paler. "What's wrong?" Long Feiyi could not help but disturb him. Gu Beiwe only shook his head and continued to take her pulse. After that, he checked Han Yunshi's eyes before replying, "The pulse is normal. There is no lesion, just like the previous few times." "Is it the poison storage space?" Long Feiyi asked nervously. Gu Beiwe was also suspicious. But, as a doctor, he was very cautious. "It's possible, but I can't be sure." Han Yunshi was still unconscious, so he had no idea if she was feeling unwell anywhere. "Then when will she wake up?" Long Feiyi did not realize that his question was nonsense. Gu Beiwe shook his head helplessly. The most troublesome illness he had encountered in his life was Han Yunshi's coma. He said, "We can only wait." Long Feiyi fell silent. If even Gu Beiwa could not do anything, then no one else in the world could. He decisively carried Han Yunshi to the bed and instructed, "You can stay in the side room. Come over if anything happens." A complicated look flashed past Gu Beiwa's eyes. Although he did not want to persuade him, he had to. "Your Highness, we don't have time to waste. 100 Poisons sect has issued a challenge. The whole of Cloud Realm is watching. If we don't show up, we will be in big trouble. No matter how big the matter is, we have to wait for her to wake up," Long Fei Yi said coldly. Han Yunshi had told him that she had already cultivated to the second level of the poison storage space. She had been working hard to break through to the third level, but had not made much progress. She only knew that the third level was called Battle Strategy. It allowed her to freely collect any poison in the world. She did not know anything else. Moreover, every time the poison storage space leveled up, it needed a trigger to help her break through the final shackle. The first time was because of the water of 10,000 poisons. The second time was because of the little things recovery. If this was the third time, then what was it that helped her break through the final shackle? Han Yunshi had not cultivated the poison storage space on the way here, nor had she encountered any poison. Long Fei Yi had a premonition that this was not because of the poison storage space's leveling up. Perhaps this was a normal coma caused by the poison storage space, but it could also be that there was something wrong with the poison storage space. How could Long Fei Yi not worry? How could Gu Beiwa not understand this? But he still tried to persuade him. "Your Highness, don't forget that this isn't a matter between you and the princess, but between the imperial clans of Eastern and Western Qin. As far as this one knows, the princess had to rack her brains to convince Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders for this cooperation." Gu Beiwa's reminder hit the nail on the head. This time, it wasn't just Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi who were heading to 100 Poisons sect. There were also higher-ups from both the Eastern and Western Qin factions. East Qin's General Bailey had sent Bailey Yuchi, a major general, to head out in secret, while Western Qin's Ning clan had sent a cavalry general named Luo Qing to head out in secret. There were also rumors that Western Zhou and Tianning had sent people to watch. 100 Poison sect was involved in murdering and robbing, so the medical community had always called them a malignant tumor in Cloud Realm continent. Medical and Medicine City had long since sent people to support them. By the time the appointed day arrived, there was no telling what the situation would be like at 100 Poisons sect. If Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi didn't go, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves to their respective Eastern, Western Qin factions or the rest of the world. Moreover, they weren't just going to kill by Yanqing this time, but to uncover the truth behind the Great Qin Empire's civil war. Seeing Long Fei Yi remain silent, Gu Beiwa took a step back and bowed. "Your Highness, please reconsider. The princess wouldn't want to break her promise." At this moment, Su Donglin, who had been standing by the door all this time, couldn't help but speak up. "Dr. Gu, if the princess doesn't wake up by then, we won't be able to deal with 100 Poisons sect either." Su Donglin had brought up the thorniest problem. Gu Beiwa had naturally thought of this point and said seriously, "At least we'll have to wait until we get there before making any plans. Right now, everything was still unknown. No matter what, they had to go to 100 Poison sect first. Whether or not they showed their faces and how to deal with the situation would give them room to adjust." Long Fei Yi glanced at Gu Beiwa before realizing that he had lost control. Su Donglin still wanted to retort, but Long Fei Yi knitted his brows and said mildly, "Su Donglin, arrange for a night's rest. We'll set off early tomorrow morning." After Su Donglin left, Long Fei Yi said mildly, "You're quite calm." Gu Beiwa was still very modest as he cupped his hands. This is this one's duty as a subordinate. That's right. As a subordinate he had to be this calm. This was his duty. Losing control and being impulsive was a kind of qualification, a kind of power. He didn't. Long Fei Yi didn't do anything but looked at Gu Beiwa for a long time. "This one will be waiting in the side room. If anything happens, I'll be there immediately." After Gu Beiwa finished speaking, he looked at Han Yunshi from afar before retreating. This night was destined to be a sleepless one for everyone. Long Fei Yi sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Han Yunshi's peaceful face. The scene of her falling unconscious replayed in his mind over and over again. She was clearly happy and smiling, but all of a sudden she lost consciousness. Facing this woman, it was the first time he had experienced the feeling of extreme joy turning into sorrow. How could he not lose control? How could he not lose control when he thought of what she had said last night about 3,000 years in the future? Today she was smiling and smiling when she suddenly fell unconscious. Then, would there be a day when she would suddenly disappear and disappear? He had always hidden this uneasiness in his heart, Late at night, Gu Beiwei wasn't in the side room, but sitting on the steps outside Han Yunxi's room. He missed Lil Thing. He tried to probe by Yanqing multiple times, but couldn't find out Lil Thing's whereabouts. Now that he was sure Lil Thing wasn't with the princess, it must have fallen into Bai Yanqing's hands. He wanted to make the princess happy before telling her about Lil Thing tomorrow. But who knew something like this would happen? If only Lil Thing was here. It could enter and exit the poison storage space, so it would know about the princess's situation. In the past, Lil Thing had been the one to keep him company on many sleepless nights. Gu Beiwei sighed. Little fellow, are you well? Lil Thing wasn't well at all. Ever since Mama Yunxi had advanced to the second level, it could sense everything about her and knew she was unconscious. It was trapped in a terrifying space that reeked of an incomparable stench. It was like a fermentation pool filled with all sorts of rotting, poisonous corpses. If it wasn't immortal, it would have rotted to death long ago. This seemed to be the poison storage space, but it also didn't. In any case, it couldn't tell. But if this wasn't the poison storage space, how could it be imprisoned? Chapter 943. That night in the poison sect's forbidden grounds, Lil Thing had chased after the man into the abyss to save him. But for some reason it didn't fall into the abyss but ended up in this space instead. The poisonous creatures in this space all looked strange, like jellyfish in the sea. They looked both like plants and animals. Lil Thing didn't know what they were, only that the stench they gave off was worse than rotting corpses. The stench made Lil Thing throw up a few times, but it slowly got used to it after a while. Lil Thing called this terrifying space the Black Space. Although this space didn't look like a poison storage space, and Lil Thing couldn't sense what was going on outside, Lil Thing still considered this space to be a poison storage space. But Lil Thing could only treat it as a poison storage space. It really didn't know what else in this world could trap it like this besides a poison storage space. Because Lil Thing had recognized Mama Yunxi as its master, it had a master-servant contract. Unless Mama Yunxi intentionally restricted it, it could enter and exit her poison storage space as it pleased. If it was another direct descendant of the poison sect, Lil Thing wouldn't be able to enter and exit freely. Only when Lil Thing's cultivation was higher than the poison storage space's owners would it be able to enter and exit freely. Otherwise it would be under the control of the owner. As for Lil Thing's cultivation, if its fangs were fully recovered, its cultivation would be the highest in the poison sect. No one would be able to match it. After all, no one could cure the poison fang's blood. Unfortunately, its vitality had been greatly damaged after Mama Yunxi had taken its blood to save someone. Add that to its injuries on Celestial Mountain, and it couldn't recover in a few short years no matter how much nourishment it took. To this day, Lil Thing still didn't know who Mama Yunxi had taken its blood to save. Every time it thought about it, it wanted nothing more than to bite that person. Unable to fully recover, Lil Thing could only eat poisonous plants to nourish its body while borrowing Mama Yunxi's strength to cultivate. When Mama Yunxi had broken through to the second level of the poison storage space, it was all because of Lil Thing's recovery. Thus, from then on, Lil Thing and Mama Yunxi's cultivation complemented each other and influenced each other. Mama Yunxi hadn't cultivated much during this time, but Lil Thing had been working hard to cultivate in the black space. It was precisely because it was working so hard that it affected Mama Yunxi and made her feel tired. Since the first day it was locked up, Lil Thing had never stopped cultivating. It only stopped when it sensed that Mama Yunxi couldn't withstand the intensity of its cultivation and fell into a coma. It was an undying and indestructible poisonous beast, while Mama Yunxi was immortal. Her endurance naturally couldn't be compared. At this moment the little thing was curled up in a dark corner. Its big tail was curled up to its neck and curled up like a hand hugging it. From the first day it was locked up, it had been cultivating day and night like a madman. It had even forgotten the time. Now that she suddenly stopped, she realized that she didn't know how long she had been locked in here before she remembered her young master. His young master, well, falling into the abyss, how could one survive? It didn't dare to think about it, but it couldn't help but think about it. The more it thought about it, the more scared it became. It could only make itself busy, so busy that it did not have the time to think too much. It was certain that the black-clothed assassin that night was not Long DeLong, but his swordsmanship was on par with Long DeLong's. It felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity towards that black-clothed assassin, but it couldn't put its finger on it. It had felt the same at Medical City's banquet as well. Could it be that the black-clothed assassin was a direct descendant of the poison sect? Was that why it felt so unfamiliar? And the black space it was trapped in belonged to the black-clothed assassin? Lil Thing had a keen sense of smell and could smell the scent of every person. However, there was only one way to determine if the black-clothed assassin was a direct descendant of the poison sect. Smell the scent of blood. Lil Thing racked its brains but couldn't figure it out. If the black-clothed assassin was a direct descendant of the poison sect, why didn't he acknowledge Mama Yunshi? These questions were too complicated and Lil Thing would get a headache if it thought too long. But if it didn't think about these questions, what else could it think about? Even if it couldn't cultivate, it had to keep its head busy. That way it wouldn't miss the young master. As long as it closed its eyes, it could pretend that the world was dark. Could it pretend that the young master was fine as long as it didn't think about him? But there was only so much it could ponder about the black-clothed assassin's identity. There was nothing left to ponder about. Lil Thing crawled to its feet and began to spin in circles. It spun faster and faster until its tail and head were about to connect. What should it do? It couldn't help but think of the young master again. Of that bright moon night when the young master was injured and fell into the abyss. He was as frail as a butterfly, broken into pieces and drifting away with the wind. No. The little thing that was rapidly spinning suddenly stopped. It had to keep itself busy again, so busy that it couldn't think. Besides cultivating, it could also eat. It could eat with all its heart and soul, eating until it became dizzy. Without any hesitation, Lil Thing flew to a nearby vine. This vine was especially vigorous. It grew next to a large tree but completely submerged it. Each of its leaves was as big as an adult's palm, and a sticky yellowish-brown liquid constantly seeped out of them. It was a kind of venom that dripped to the ground. And the entire vine looked like it was suffering from a serious illness, with pus constantly flowing out. It was very disgusting. Lil Thing climbed up the tree without hesitation, allowing the disgusting mucus to stain its snow-white fur. Once it was on the tree, the stench became even stronger. Who knew that Lil Thing would bury its head in the dense leaves, crazily gnawing on them? Not long after, Lil Thing raised its head and vomited. But once it finished vomiting, it continued to gnaw. After vomiting a few times, it stopped vomiting. It wasn't like it didn't eat continuously for days and nights. It didn't care even if the sky collapsed. Pretend these poisonous things were delicious food. Pretend as long as it was busy it wouldn't think too much. Pretend as long as it didn't think too much, the bad things wouldn't happen. Lil Thing just ate and ate like this. It didn't know how much these poisonous things would affect it in the future. Lil Thing's appetite was very big. In just one day it had eaten all the poisonous things around it. The owner of this black space could obviously sense it. But he could only imprison Lil Thing in the space and couldn't do anything else to it. Lil Thing hoped that Mama Yunshi would wake up quickly and rest so that it could continue to cultivate. Cultivation was the only way for it to escape the black space. Mama Yunshi was about to break through the third level of the poison storage space. She just needed an opportunity, a helping hand. Lil Thing also hoped that Mama Yunshi would quickly advance to the third level. As long as it could, it would be able to completely connect with Mama Yunshi's mind and communicate with her soul. At this time, Han Yunshi was unconscious and didn't know how hard Lil Thing was working. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwa didn't know either. They had already left the tea house and were on their way to the 100 Poisons sect. Long Fei Yi watched over Han Yunshi day and night. Gu Beiwa and Bailey Mingxiang sat in the same carriage. He frowned and didn't say a word. Bailey Mingxiang didn't disturb him, but was filled with worry as well. Day after day passed, but Han Yunshi still didn't wake up. The closer they got to the 100 Poisons sect, the more nervous everyone grew. One afternoon, while they were resting by the stream, Long Fei Yi received some bad news. Long Qianma had been invited to Western Qin by Emperor Kangqing to publicly express his support for the alliance between Eastern and Western Qin against the 100 Poisons sect. Support us. Gu Beiwa smiled. That's not Long Qianma's true goal. He and Emperor Kangqing want to act as witnesses for the alliance between Eastern and Western Qin so that they can figure out the true cause of the civil war, Long Fei Yi said. Not only did the Eastern and Western Qin imperial clans have their own versions of the cause of the Great Qin Empire civil war, but the rest of Cloud Realm continent had their own theories as well. No one knew which was the true cause, or which of the two imperial clans was the true victim, or which was the true culprit behind the destruction of the Great Qin Empire. Ever since Myriad Merchant Hall announced the alliance between Eastern and Western Qin, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi had teamed up to capture Bai Yanqing. The topic had once again become a hot topic in Cloud Realm continent. After all, Eastern Western Qin and Eastern Qin occupied half of Cloud Realm continent. This matter directly affected the future of the continent, so who wouldn't pay attention or be curious? Moreover, many people were curious to know who would emerge victorious after the former couple, Long Fei-yi and Han Yunxi, turned against each other. Act as witnesses, now that's interesting. Gu Beiwei was about to continue when Long Fei-yi's eyes flashed viciously. Cold, he said, that depends on whether they have the skills to see it. The 100 Poisons sect was located within Western Zhou's borders. Had Emperor Kangqing invited Long Qianma as the host, or had Long Qianma sought him out of his own accord? Both Western Zhou and Tianning had long been exhausted from last year's war. It would take them at least 5 or 10 years before they had enough troops and money to wage a war. But Long Qianma and Emperor Kangqing were still so restless that they wanted to get involved in the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin. It looks like Emperor Kangqing is going to do his part as a host, Gu Beiwei said helplessly. As expected, Long Fei received news the next day that Emperor Kangqing, as the host, had sent invitations to Medical and Medicine City, inviting them to witness the ceremony together. What a joke. Even someone as benevolent as Gu Beiwei found it ironic. Who in the world knew that Medical and Medicine City had long been under Han Yunxi's control? Wasn't Emperor Kangqing's actions superfluous? Medical and Medicine City didn't need his invitation even if they wanted to go. What's Kangqing planning? Long Fei-yi began to wonder. Emperor Kangqing didn't necessarily want to invite Medical and Medicine City. On the contrary, he wanted to make a big fuss so that even if he and Han Yunxi captured Bai Yanqing, they couldn't interrogate him in private. They could only interrogate him in public. This matter wouldn't affect Western Zhou much. Why would Emperor Kangqing worry about such things if he wanted to protect them? Ask Chu Tianyin what Kangqing's motives are. Long Fei instructed coldly. After Gu Beiwei returned, he naturally left the task of contacting Chu Tianyin to him. Long Fei-yi returned to the carriage to stand guard by Han Yunxi's side. He took her hand and pressed it against his lips, looking even quieter than she was. There were still 3 days left until the deadline on their letter of challenge. Would Han Yunxi wake up in time? Chapter 944. Even an ordinary citizen would pay attention to 100 Poisons sect, much less Jun Yixie and Ning Cheng. Jun Yixie had yet to give Ning Cheng a clear answer regarding the 30,000 warhorses. Ning Cheng, on the other hand, kept a high profile. Not only did he not attack Jun Yixie, he did not even mention it. It had to be said that Ning Cheng's attitude had more or less influenced Jun Yixie's decision. But everything was in Jun Yixie's heart, so he didn't say a word. Over the past few days, he and Ning Cheng had been paying attention to 100 Poisons sect. Ning Cheng guessed that Jun Yixie was probably waiting for the results of 100 Poisons sect before making a decision. Although Ning Cheng was unwilling to admit it, he knew that Bai Yanqing would not be able to escape if Long Fei-yi and Han Yunxi joined forces. So what if they caught Bai Yanqing? Bai Yanqing did not even want the world. Everything he did was to sow discord between Eastern and Western Qin. Would such a person speak the truth? Western Zhou's Emperor Kangqing had invited various factions and made such a big deal out of it. How many people would rush to 100 Poisons sect in the next few days? How many people would come to watch? Under these circumstances, Bai Yanqing would be even less likely to speak. In fact, Bai Yanqing would even use such a big event to cause the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin to sink to a point of no return. Ning Cheng punched the wall with his fist. He had spent a lot of effort over the past few days, but he could not find an opportunity to send a message under Jun Yixie's surveillance. How could he have imagined that there would be a day when he would spend so much effort to resolve the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin? At this moment, Bai Yuqiao entered. Every time Bai Yuqiao came, there was only one thing, and that was the grudge between Jun Yixie and Bai Yanqing. She didn't dare to ask Jun Yixie directly, so she could only ask Ning Cheng for information. Is my senior brother really not planning to go to 100 Poisons sect? Bai Yuqiao asked the moment he entered. He never beat around the bush. Although it was too late to set off now, she was still worried. No. Ning Cheng said coldly, "Little girl, you're underestimating your senior brother. Even if Bai Yanqing is his father, he won't go." What did he say to you? Bai Yuqiao asked anxiously. What? Do you like your senior brother that much? Ning Cheng asked with a sneer. What nonsense are you talking about? Bai Yuqiao denied in a huff, but her face was still red. Ning Cheng shrugged and didn't say anything. He just pointed at the door for her to leave. What did my senior brother say to you? Bai Yuqiao asked anxiously. She was worried that although her senior brother didn't go personally, he would still send someone to help. After all, the fact that her senior brother was the sect master of 100 Poisons sect had long been exposed by Han Yunxi. Now, everyone was paying attention to the Feng clan, so very few people would mention him. However, this didn't mean that everyone had forgotten about him. At this time, not only could he not get involved, but it was also best to take the opportunity to draw a clear line between himself and 100 Poison sect so that he wouldn't become the target of public criticism. Seeing that Bai Yuqiao wasn't leaving, Ning Qing didn't say anything more and left. However, Bai Yuqiao immediately rushed in front of him and blocked him. "What do you want in order to tell me?" "Ning Qing, don't forget that you were poisoned to death by Han Yunxi. I saved you." "So what?" Ning Qing raised his eyebrows and asked back. "Do you believe that I can have my senior brother kill you at any time?" Bai Yuqiao warned. Bai Yuqiao was simply deceiving herself. Ning Qing controlled his temper and said to her word by word, "Your senior brother didn't put you in his eyes at all, let alone put you in his heart. Your words aren't even as important as that little soldier in my battalion commander's camp. If you don't believe me, you can go and try." Bai Yuqiao stared blankly. She was self-aware and had enough eyesight to clearly see her position in front of her senior brother. Ever since she came back, she had never seen her face like this. However, her senior brother hadn't asked a single word about it. One had to know that her face was completely ruined. It was very ugly. However, it was one thing to know about it and another to have it mentioned by someone else. This was like a scar that had formed a scab. The scab that one carefully removed was completely different from the scab being removed by someone else. The latter would be very, very painful. Ning Qing walked around her and headed out of the door. Who knew that Bai Yuqiao would chase after him and grab Ning Qing's arm? Almost at the same time that Bai Yuqiao grabbed his arm, Ning Qing fiercely flung it away, as if he didn't like this kind of touch. Bai Yuqiao really almost fell out. Ning Qing looked over angrily. Bai Yuqiao actually said loudly, "Yes, I like my senior brother. So what? What does that have to do with me?" Ning Qing snorted. "I'm begging you, all right?" Bai Yuqiao was actually about to cry. Such a vicious and stubborn girl. Her face had been ruined by goo, but she had never cried. Now, she was actually crying because of Ning Qing's harsh words? Unfortunately, Ning Qing didn't have the slightest bit of compassion. When he was in Myriad Merchant Hall, there were many women who acted coquettishly in front of him. There were also many who pretended to be pitiful. All of them were more beautiful and had higher status than Bai Yuqiao, but he had never softened his heart, let alone Bai Yuqiao. Ning Qing wasn't someone who would show mercy to women. If it was in the past, Ning Qing would definitely leave without looking back. However, this time, Ning Qing seemed to have broken his patience. He answered Bai Yuqiao, "Why should I help you?" When he said this, Bai Yuqiao finally felt less hopeless. She hurriedly asked, "What do I have to do for you to help me?" Ning Qing snorted softly, "What can you do?" Bai Yuqiao was afraid of Ning Qing's cold attitude earlier. She was afraid that Ning Qing would be unhappy and not even give her a chance. How could she have known that Ning Qing had his eyes on her for a long time? "As long as you don't betray my senior brother, I can do anything." Bai Yuqiao immediately revealed her bottom line. Ning Qing knew that he was halfway to success. When Bai Yuqiao came to ask about Jun Yixie, she would send away the people who were watching him inside and outside the tent. Therefore he could only hide from Jun Yixie through Bai Yuqiao. Ning Qing finally turned around and came back. He said indifferently, "When the time comes, there's something that you can help me with." "Say it." Bai Yuqiao was excited. "He help me buy a few jars of wine. Don't let your senior brother know." Ning Qing said casually. Bai Yuqiao was naturally vigilant. "Why don't you let my senior brother know? He didn't forbid you from drinking." Ning Qing sneered, "The wine in his army can't even be swallowed. It's not enough for this patriarch to drink. Since your senior brother is so short on money, I won't despise him. I don't want to ask for trouble." Bai Yuqiao knew how much senior brother needed money. Bai Yuqiao also knew how much senior brother cared about his face. If Ning Qing despised senior brother for such a small matter, senior brother would definitely fly into a rage out of humiliation. Bai Yuqiao was originally on guard against Ning Qing asking her to do something big. She didn't expect that it would be such a small matter as secretly buying wine. She let down her guard a lot. "What kind of wine do you want to drink? I'll treat you." Although she didn't have much money, she could still treat Ning Qing to a meal. Who knew that the moment Ning Qing opened his mouth, he would scare her. 10 jars of iced wine will do," Ning Qing said. The corner of Bai Yuqiao's mouth twitched. Iced wine was a kind of wine that was unique to Northern Li. It was the best kind of wine produced in Northern Li. It was specially provided by the imperial family. Only when the imperial family was happy and rewarded it to the nobles and officials would this kind of wine flow out of the palace. Some people who were rewarded didn't like wine and loved money. They would secretly give the iced wine to the big wineries to secretly sell. Over time, some people in the imperial family knew about this. Therefore, every year when the iced wine was sent to the palace as tribute, those princes and imperial grandsons who lacked pocket money would secretly take out the iced wine and sell it at a high price. This matter was no secret in Northern Lee's noble circle. Over the years, the iced wine had become more and more expensive. A small jar of only 4 or 5 cups would cost more than 5,000 taels of silver. But there were still people who could afford it. These people didn't want to buy the wine to drink. They wanted to get close to the people who bought the wine and get close to the princes and imperial grandsons. To put it bluntly, this was disguised bribery. Ning Qing wanted 10 jars of this iced wine. Wouldn't that be 50,000 taels? Not to mention 50,000 taels, she didn't even have 5,000 taels. The few gold cards that Ning Qing had given her before, she had already given them all to her senior brother to pay for the army. Taking a step back, even if those gold cards were still in her hands, she couldn't spend so much money to buy wine for Ning Qing. Ning Qing was a rich man and she was just a poor person. Bai Yuqiao looked at Ning Qing and finally understood the real reason why Ning Qing didn't ask her senior brother for wine. He was simply humiliating her senior brother for being poor. This wine is rare, I can't afford it. Bai Yuqiao was very direct. Ning Qing didn't hesitate to take out a few banknotes worth 10,000 taels of silver. This family had never drinks wine that a woman pays for. This is 100,000 taels, I'll sell as much as you have. The rest will be a fee for my hard work. Although the price of iced wine wasn't fixed, and the difference in price between different places wasn't small, it shouldn't be a difference of 50,000 taels. This fee for his hard work immediately moved Bai Yuqiao. She immediately agreed, thinking that she could save the remaining 10,000 taels for emergencies. Bai Yuqiao took the banknotes. I promise you. Can you tell me why senior brother didn't go to 100 Poison sect? He's waiting for your master to have nowhere else to go and come find him. Ning Qing replied. Bai Yuqiao was very smart, but how could she compete with him? You mean my master won't go to 100 Poison sect? Bai Yuqiao said seriously. She had always guessed this. Only her thoughts were crooked. She thought her master wouldn't go, and her senior brother would go and stand up for 100 Poison sect. She neglected the fact that her senior brother was waiting for her master to come. Senior brother told you? Bai Yuqiao needed this confirmation. Ning Qing shrugged his shoulders and didn't say anything. Bai Yuqiao thought he had tacitly agreed. Ning Qing, I can continue to help you sell wine and do other things. Promise me, if my master comes, you must persuade my senior brother not to fall into Bai Yanqing's trap. Bai Yuqiao said seriously. Bring me 10 jars of iced wine first. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. Ning Qing finished speaking, flicked his sleeves and strode away. Bai Yuqiao didn't hesitate. That night, she left the army camp and personally found someone to sell wine. Jun Yixie couldn't see any clues about this matter, but Jun Yixie might not agree, and also might not ask for Ning Qing's wine money. Bai Yuqiao was different. She would definitely help Ning Qing spend the banknotes. And what Ning Qing wanted was these banknotes to flow out. As for whether Bai Yanqing would go to 100 Poison sect or come to see Jun Yixie, Ning Qing wasn't completely sure. He was more inclined to believe that Bai Yanqing would go to 100 Poison sect. The day was getting closer, but there was still no news from Bai Yanqing. How would he choose? Mo, it said that I've been typing names wrong a lot lately. Faint sadness. Chapter 945. The day of the challenge approached, but there was still no news from Bai Yanqing and no response from 100 Poison sect. Even Han Yunxi was still unconscious. Tomorrow was the day of the challenge. Long Fei Ye's group had already arrived at Great Central Mountain, where 100 Poison sect was located. Great Central Mountain was the tallest mountain in the eastern part of Western Zhou, and 100 Poison sect ruled it. Although it was located within Western Zhou's borders, it wasn't under its jurisdiction. The Western Zhou imperial family couldn't do anything to 100 Poison sect, so they had always avoided the issue. Only recently did Emperor Kong Qing assume the role of Western Zhou's master, denouncing 100 Poison sect and entertaining guests. After occupying Great Central Mountain, 100 Poison sect planted all kinds of poisonous plants and bred many poisonous creatures, mainly poisonous snakes. It had to be said that Han Yunxi's group had chosen the right time to come. When winter came, most of the poisonous creatures would hide and hibernate, especially the poisonous snakes. They had avoided a lot of trouble. All kinds of small palaces and pavilions could be found throughout Great Central Mountain. The main palace of Hundred Poisons sect, Hundred Poisons Temple, was located at the peak of Great Central Mountain. A stone staircase led from the foot of the mountain to Hundred Poisons Temple. At the foot of Great Central Mountain was Great Central Village. Because of Hundred Poisons sect, the villagers here relied on medicinal herbs for a living. They didn't sell herbs to Hundred Poisons sect, but rather to those who came to learn from their masters or to those who came to seek treatment for poisons. Hundred Poisons sect did all kinds of shady business such as murder, robbery and the sale of poisons. Occasionally, a disciple would treat someone's poison, but the fee was exorbitant. Of course, more importantly, they trained poison masters, poison humans and poison corpses for Jun Yixie's use. Back when Han Yunxi exposed Jun Yixie's use of poison goo in Medical City, the city had sent many spies to infiltrate the Hundred Poisons sect to investigate the matter. Unfortunately, none of them had succeeded. The Wang clan of Medicine City, on Long Fei Ye's request, had sent a few spies, but they hadn't had the opportunity to come into contact with Bai Yanqing and his 2 disciples, so they hadn't been able to obtain much useful information. This was a place that couldn't be won by wits, only brute force. Long Fei Ye's group did not stay in Great Central Town. After arriving in secret, they stayed in a house on the northern outskirts of Great Central Town. This was the Wang clan's territory. Meanwhile, Emperor Kongqing was in the Great Central County town, about 10 li away from Great Central Village, receiving guests who had come to join in on the fun. Long Qianma had indeed come in person. It was almost noon, which meant that Long Fei Yi and the others had half a day less. However, Han Yunxi was still lying on the bed, motionless. After arriving at the mansion early in the morning, Long Fei Yi had been sitting beside Han Yunxi, holding her hand and interlocking their fingers until now. Gu Beiwei stood by the side, completely silent. If he had been holding on to hope along the way, he would have been able to remain calm. He would have shared Long Fei Ye's worries and made plans for the Hundred Poisons sect. But now he was completely unable to think. Although he hadn't mentioned anything to Long Fei Yi, he couldn't help but feel flustered. Han Yunxi had never been unconscious for so long. All kinds of cultivation carried the risk of qi deviation, and the poison storage space was no exception. If Han Yunxi really did go mad, would she never wake up? Had Long Fei Yi ever wondered the same thing? By now, all of Cloud Realm continent was anxiously waiting for the big show at Hundred Poisons sect. Many of its powers had gathered around the sect as well. It had been a long time since Cloud Realm continent had been so lively, right? But these 2 men had long forgotten about the excitement. They only wanted Han Yunxi to wake up. It wasn't because she was the only one who could attack Hundred Poisons sect, but because she was the only one in their world. Time didn't stop and soon it was noon. The food that Bailey Mingxiang had personally delivered was carried out untouched. Bailey Mingxiang stood by the door with her hands clasped in prayer. She had made the food but didn't eat it herself. Whether it was the princess, His Highness or Dr. Gu, she couldn't bear to look at them. By now Su Donglin and Uncle Gao had returned. Su Donglin stood by the door and reported, "Your Highness, this subordinate and Uncle Gao went around town just then and saw a few familiar faces." If the princess wasn't unconscious, Su Donglin would have bypassed His Highness and let her guess who they were. But now that she was unconscious, he couldn't muster up the courage to act impudently. "It's Carefree City Lord Qi Zonglin and Young City Lord Qi Yaotian. They've come to join in the fun too," Su Donglin reported. Long Fei Yi had been in a bad mood for the past few days. As soon as he heard the words, Carefree City, his temper flared. He suddenly stood up and dragged Han Yunxi's hand into the quilt. Then he said to Gu Beiwei solemnly, "Protect her." After that he left the room. "Lead the way," Lung Lung said to Su Donglin. Su Donglin was somewhat dazed. For a moment he didn't understand what His Highness meant. Long Fei Ye's eyes were terrifyingly cold. He asked coldly, "Where is Qi Zonglin?" When he asked several experts to escort Han Yunxi back to the governor's residence from Heaven Mountain, Han Yunxi had been ambushed by the people of Carefree City on her way back. Qi Zonglin, as the mayor of a city, had led all the experts of Carefree City to besiege Han Yunxi, a weak woman who did not know any martial arts. He was not only bullying Han Yunxi but also insulting Han Yunxi's man. If Gu hadn't arrived in time, God knew what Qi Zonglin would have done. It was unforgivable. Although he had declared that whoever dared to be friends with Qi Zonglin would be enemies with him, Long Fei Yi, this couldn't be counted as revenge at all. He had been unable to find time to settle the score with Qi Zonglin in person. Now that Qi Zonglin had come knocking on his door, he couldn't be blamed for being in a bad mood. Under Su Donglin's guidance, Long Fei Yi arrived at the entrance of a brothel in Great Central Town. "Your Highness, I saw the father and son of the Qi family enter," Su Donglin reported truthfully. "Call them out," Long Fei Yi said indifferently. How could someone as obsessed with cleanliness as him enter a brothel? The only time he did so was to find Han Yunxi. He lowered his eyes and didn't even look at the brothel. "Yes, Your Highness." Su Donglin's voice was shaking. He knew very well that when His Highness was angry, the calmer his tone was, the more furious he was. Su Donglin couldn't imagine what would happen when he entered the brothel. Su Donglin quickly found Qi Yaotian. Qi Yaotian had been poisoned when he attacked Han Yunxi and couldn't detoxify the poison in time, so he could only cut off his arm. At this time, Qi Yaotian was standing by the railing on the second floor, looking at the singing and dancing in the lobby downstairs. His left arm was empty. Su Donglin walked forward and said politely, "Young hero, my master invites you." Qi Yaotian turned around and replied coldly, "Who?" People who were looking for him were either here to kill him for revenge or to invite him to kill someone. Qi Yaotian took Su Donglin's polite attitude as a business opportunity. "You'll know when you get there." Su Donglin didn't dare to tell the truth. If he told the truth, what if Qi Yaotian turned around and fled? He couldn't catch up to him, so where could he find him? When looking for an assassin to negotiate a business deal, Su Donglin was obviously misleading him on purpose. Sure enough, Qi Yaotian didn't ask any more questions. "Lead the way, please." Su Donglin finally let out a sigh of relief. Qi Yaotian didn't expect that the person looking for him would be standing at the entrance. He lowered his head. Although he had lost an arm, he was dressed as an assassin and had a cold expression. He was still intimidating. When he went down from the second floor, everyone took the initiative to make way for him. Outside the door, Long Fei Yi had already attracted a lot of onlookers. What kind of scene was this? A man who angered men and gods alike, standing at the entrance of the brothel with a cold expression. Qi Yaotian was stunned when he saw Long Fei Yi after walking out of the door. His body's reaction was faster than his brain's. His face turned pale as he turned around to flee. The body's reaction was faster than the brain's. This was called instinctive reaction. The people of Carefree City were afraid of Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi hadn't used his sword for a long time. However, even though Su Donglin was staring at him, he couldn't clearly see Qi Yaotian unsheathing his sword. Instead, he was blinded by the sword's radiance. When he looked again, Long Fei Yi fiercely slashed his sword and cut off Qi Yaotian's empty sleeve. Qi Yaotian also couldn't clearly see Long Fei Yi's move just now. However, he could feel that Long Fei Yi's sword energy was terrifying. It was far from what he had seen before. How much had Long Fei Yi's martial arts improved after he returned from Heaven Mountain? How could Qi Yaotian retaliate? He could only flee. However, he soon heard the whistling sound of sword energy. The moment he heard the whistling sound, his right arm was cut off. It was forcefully chopped off and blood splattered all over the ground. Qi Yaotian was already vexed after losing an arm. Now that his other arm was cut off, he didn't even have a sword hand. He suddenly roared and turned around to charge at Long Fei Yi. At this time he finally saw the trembling sword in Long Fei Yi's hand pointing at his legs. So, Long Fei Yi wanted to cut off his legs? No. Qi Yaotian immediately knelt down and loudly begged for mercy. "Long Fei Yi, Carefree City made things difficult for the Western Qin princess. We have never disrespected you. I beg you, please spare my life for the sake of our past cooperation. My Carefree City is willing to pledge loyalty to you from now on." At this time, the surrounding spectators finally learned of Long Fei Yi's identity. They were all very surprised. No wonder this man was so eye-catching. So he was the East Qin Crown Prince, Long Fei Yi. He was here. Where was the Western Qin Princess, Han Yunxi? Was she also here? Carefree City had bullied the Western Qin Princess. What was Long Fei Yi doing? Was he avenging the Western Qin Princess? The two of them were burdened with national enmity and had long turned against each other. They had no choice but to cooperate this time. Just what did Long Fei Yi mean by this? Everyone began to talk amongst themselves. Most of the spectators had come from all over Cloud Realm continent to watch the show. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. He was about to swing his sword a third time when Carefree City City Lord, Qi Zonglin's voice rang out. "Who dares to bully me just now?" Qi Zonglin had been enjoying himself in the comfort of his women when he heard the procuress say that Qi Yaotian had been beaten up at the door. He didn't ask for details before he rushed out. After all, anyone who could beat Qi Yaotian couldn't be weak. By the time Qi Zonglin reached the door, he swallowed the rest of his words. He didn't even notice his son's injuries as he stared in shock at Long Fei Yi. You? Long Fei Yi wasn't so angry when he saw Qi Yaotian. At the sight of Qi Zonglin, the flames in Long Fei's eyes burned fiercely. Chapter 946. Long Fei Yi was about to swing his sword at Qi Yaotian, but the tip of his sword changed direction and slashed viciously at Qi Zonglin. This time, everyone present could see his movements clearly as well as the sword ray. The cold blue sword ray followed his movements and the sword Qi, accurately piercing through the brothel's door over Qi Zonglin's head. It was unstoppable and unstoppable. In an instant, the large brothel rumbled as a long crack appeared in the middle. The three-story building was in imminent danger and could collapse at any moment. Everyone came out to watch the commotion. There weren't many people left in the brothel, so they all fled. Qi Zonglin was completely unharmed, and it was precisely because of this that he was dumbfounded. He looked down at his feet and saw that the ground beneath his feet had also cracked open. Qi Zonglin couldn't believe that he was completely unharmed in this situation, but the truth was right in front of his eyes. Just what level had Long Fei Yi's swordsmanship reached? Just how powerful was his internal energy? How could he control his internal energy so precisely? It was said that Long Fei Yi could already contend against Elder Kenzo back at Celestial Mountain. Then what about now? Was he already Cloud Realm's #1 expert, an unrivaled sovereign of the martial arts world? Why hadn't Long Fei Yi's attack hurt him? Qi Zonglin didn't have time to think. He hurriedly knelt before Long Fei Yi and repeated Qi Yaotian's words. He wanted to surrender, submit and serve. It wasn't that he lacked backbone as the city lord, but that Long Fei Yi was too strong. At this level, it would only take him a day to destroy Carefree City all by himself. The Qi father and son had knelt in front of everyone and begged for mercy. Carefree City had lost all face. However, this wasn't enough to satisfy Long Fei Yi. Even killing the father and son wouldn't satisfy his anger. Besides, killing them would be letting them off too easily. Long Fei Yi's face darkened as he pointed his sword at Qi Zonglin. Driven to desperation, Qi Zonglin simply questioned, "Long Fei Yi, why did you kill the old man? If you don't give the old man a reason, the old man will not accept it." Long Fei Yi hadn't said a word since the beginning, so he didn't care about Qi Zonglin at all. Qi Zonglin was clearly trying to find a way out for himself by asking this. He quickly said, "If it's to take revenge for Han Yunxi, what qualifications do you have as the East Qing Crown Prince? Or are you and Han Yunxi still clinging to each other?" As he spoke, he immediately sought the support of the surrounding people. "Everyone, what do you think? Does the East Qing Crown Prince and the Western Qing Princess have some unspeakable secret? If Han Yunxi wants to take revenge on the old man, let her do it herself." The anger coming from Long Fei Yi made the surrounding people not dare approach, not to mention supporting Qi Zonglin. Even if they were dissatisfied, they could only carefully hide it in their hearts. Su Donglin looked over in disbelief. It had been a long time since he had seen someone like Qi Zonglin who sought his own death. The words unspeakable secret were already harsh enough, but Qi Zonglin actually had the face to ask the princess to personally take revenge on him? After a group of men besieged a woman, they actually wanted the woman to seek revenge on them? What did this count for? Su Donglin couldn't help letting out a sigh. "City Lord Qi, how can you bully a woman like this?" Long Fei Yi did not waste words. He suddenly raised his hand and slashed out with his sword. It looked like a handsome movement and didn't have much killing power, but Qi Zonglin's clothes were instantly torn to pieces. Qi Yaotian kneeling beside Qi Zonglin was also affected by the sword Qi. His outer clothes were torn apart and he was only left with a thin undershirt. For a while the crowd was silent. Just like Long Fei Yi's cold face, it was incomparably terrifying. The kneeling Qi Zonglin was completely naked, not covering anything at all. This body of old flesh made everyone forget that Qi Zonglin's body was not bad. Ah. Only when the women in the crowd screamed did everyone come back to their senses and understand what had just happened. Qi Zonglin quickly covered his vitals in fear. His old face was as red as blood and even his eyes were red. Su Donglin looked over and felt that the flesh on Qi Zonglin's face was much uglier than the old flesh on his body. "Long Fei Yi, old man will fight it out with you." He rushed forward in a frenzy, but Long Fei raised his sword and pointed it at him. Qi Zonglin was so angry that he almost lost his mind. He actually forgot about his own sword, which had fallen to the side. Instead, he tried to use his bare hands to block Long Fei's blade. Because of his anger, Long Fei's sword was filled with sword Qi. Forget about touching it, even getting close to it would hurt him. Qi Yaotian finally recovered his wits and rushed over to grab his father. Unfortunately, his hands were useless, so he could only knock his father aside. As Qi Zonglin crashed to the ground, Qi Yaotian cried out, "Father, let's go." Qi Yaotian could tell that Long Feiyi didn't want to kill them, but humiliate them. If they didn't leave now, they'd soon become the laughingstock of Great Central Village. All of Cloud Realm Continent was paying attention to 100 Poisons sect now, so Great Central Village was the most sensitive place. Anything that happened here, big or small, would spread immediately. Carefree City would become the laughingstock of the world before 100 Poisons sect's show even started. Moreover, if they stayed any longer, what if Long Feiyi changed his mind? With Long Feiyi's current strength, killing the father and son duo would only take a single thought. Qi Zonglin finally recovered his wits and threw himself at a nearby person, trying to steal his clothes. That person hastily backed away while Qi Zonglin threw himself at an old man. The old man was only a commoner, so he was scared stiff in place and couldn't move. Fortunately, Su Donglin pulled him away in time. Seeing this, the onlookers scattered in all directions, afraid that they'd be too late. Qi Zonglin was even more wretched than a street rat. He was about to flee when Long Feiyi called him back. Qi Zonglin. Both Qi Zonglin and Qi Yaotian jumped in fright and didn't dare to look back. Long Feiyi said, "This crown prince is avenging the princess of Western Qin. This is to show our sincerity in cooperating." So speaking, Long Feiyi turned to leave without waiting for Qi Zonglin and his son to escape. How could this father and son die? He had to let them live on and accept the world's humiliation. He could use this chance to tell the world that no matter what his relationship with Han Yunxi was or what his stance was, anyone who bullied Han Yunxi wouldn't have a good ending. Qi Zonglin was an ambitious and ruthless character in the world of assassins, but his reputation was ruined just like that. After today, who would be willing to hire Carefree City's assassins? Who would still want to work with Qi Zonglin? Even Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi's rivals would probably look down on Qi Zonglin. No one in the history of Cloud Realm Continent had ever been humiliated like this. This scene was simply the prelude to the 100 Poisons sect drama. By the time Long Feiyi shook off his pursuers and returned to his residence in the northern suburbs, news of the joke had already reached Great Central County and spread to every corner of Cloud Realm Continent. What a delightful revenge, what a joke. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi had no idea. At this moment she was still lying quietly on the bed. Her face was bare but still breathtakingly beautiful. No one would ever get tired of looking at her. Those who didn't know the situation would only assume that she was sleeping. As long as Long Feiyi called her gently, she'd wake up. Who knew how many times Long Feiyi had called her over the past few nights? Long Feiyi didn't say a word the entire way back from Great Central County. Without Han Yunxi waking up, his mood wouldn't improve no matter how much he vented. Gu Beiwei had no interest in Carefree City's affairs, so he didn't ask Long Feiyi and Su Donglin anything when they returned. Outside, the skies grew dark. It was already night. Great Central County, Western Zhou, and all of Cloud Realm Continent were in an uproar. Only this small house remained silent. Its silence was enough to silence the entire Cloud Realm Continent. By now, all of 100 Poisons sect had heard of the news. In place of Jun Yixie and Bai Yuqiao was a senior member of the 100 Poisons sect's Council of Elders. He was also an outstanding talent in the poison world, Shi Jiuxia. Elder Shi, we've made some inquiries. Today's incident in Great Central County was indeed caused by Long Feiyi. Our spies in town have all lost track of him. Now we're not sure if Long Feiyi came alone or with Han Yunxi, the scout reported. Didn't they say that the young general of the Bailey army is staying in Great Central County? Long Feiyi isn't there? Shi Jiuxia asked. He didn't blame the scout because few people in the world could track down Long Feiyi. Nope. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's people are in Great Central County as well. This subordinate has sent people to investigate, but Han Yunxi isn't there either, the scout replied. Shi Jiuxia began to mutter to himself. Could it be that the two of them are really in cahoots? Great Central County had plenty of honored guests, but 100 Poisons sect had no plans to make a move. After all, they weren't their targets, so there was no need for them to seek trouble at a time like this. Moreover, Shi Jiuxia still couldn't figure out Emperor Kong Cheng's motives for such a high-profile move. He couldn't help but worry that Long Feiyi and Western Zhou's emperor were putting on a show. If they acted rashly, they'd fall into a trap. Of course, Shi Jiuxia couldn't make a decision on such a big matter. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi had come for the old sect leader, but there was still no news of him. No one in 100 Poisons sect knew of his whereabouts. Shi Jiuxia had already sent no less than 10 urgent messages to the current sect leader, Jun Yixie, but Jun Yixie hadn't replied a word. Shi Jiuxia had tried to contact Bai Yuqiao, but couldn't get in touch with him. It was already late at night. Tomorrow noon would be Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's challenge, so he didn't know what to do. Was the old sect leader coming or not? After all, Long Fei Yi's actions today at Great Central County meant that he might join forces with Han Yunxi to destroy 100 Poison Sect if the old sect leader didn't show up. The more Shi Jiuxia thought, the more nervous he grew. Although he'd already ordered for the 100 Poison Sect to be surrounded, he was still afraid to face the #1 expert of the Wulin world and the leader of the Poisons community. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night for many. Far away in Great Central County, Long Qianma had just finished his meeting with Emperor Kongqing and returned to his rooms. Ever since the battle with the Ning clan troops, the Tianan and Western Zhou had both laid down their flags and ceased all activities. They didn't show their faces in Cloud Realm Continent's affairs. But this time it wasn't Emperor Kongqing who took the lead, but Shi Jiuxia and Emperor Kongqing working together in private. Emperor Kongqing agreed to use his name as the host to invite the world's nobles and heroes to Western Zhou. Shi Jiuxia promised Emperor Kongqing that if Eastern and Western Qin were to fight against Northern Li in the future, Western Zhou and Tian would advance and retreat together. Emperor Kongqing's actions might very well offend Eastern and Western Qin. He was only willing to cooperate because Long Qianma had given him a huge benefit. This benefit was related to Chapter 947. Long Qianma's gift to Emperor Kongqing involved Western Zhou's trump card, the Chu clan troops. Years ago, the Chu clan had betrayed Western Zhou's imperial clan and sought refuge with Tianning. The two elders of the Chu clan had mobilized their troops for a civil war that broke free from Western Zhou's control. This was the main reason why Western Zhou had fallen from being a major power in the West to its current state in just a few short years. However, after the Chu clan broke away from Western Zhou, Ning Cheng had dealt them a vicious blow. Not only did they fail to take over Tianning, they failed to establish themselves as the hegemon of a region and suffered disastrous losses. Afterwards, Chu Tianyin listened to Gu Beiyue's plan and pretended to surrender to Western Zhou. This gave Western Zhou a chance to ally with the Tianan and launch a pincer attack against Ning Cheng. That battle had forced Ning Cheng to use the red coat cannons he'd set up to defend Northern Li. Although Ning Cheng had won 2 battles against both Western Zhou and Tianan, he'd still gained the upper hand and won 2 battles. However, the Ning clan army had also suffered a blow because of this. Otherwise, the Ning clan army wouldn't have suffered defeat after defeat in the battle with the Bailey army not long ago. Northern Li hadn't participated in the war because of the horse plague, while Long Fei Yi's commander-in-chief's estate in the south-central regions was the true fisherman. Western Zhou and Tian were separated by Tianning, but Chu Tianyin had risked Ning Cheng's pursuit to forge an alliance. But now Long Qianma was using the Chu clan troops as bait to ally with Emperor Kongqing. What would Chu Tianyin think if he found out? Long Qianma's gift to Emperor Kongqing was Long Qianma gaining control of a powerful deputy general in the Chu clan troops named Wei Mingshi. The 7 noble families had limited clansmen, so the Chu clan, Ning clan and Bailey army were all led by clansmen. They would then recruit capable men and buy horses. Wei Mingshi was one of the generals Chu Yuni had spent a lot of money to recruit. He'd raised the man himself and personally taught him archery skills. The last time Chu Tianyin had pretended to surrender, the Emperor of Qin had no choice but to give him a lot of military power in order to protect the eastern border. Now the Chu family had once again taken control of the military power in Western Zhou. After the war, Emperor Kongqing had a headache for several days trying to regain his military authority. Long Qianma's recommendation of this person was both a show of goodwill to Emperor Kongqing and a threat to him. Long Qianma controlled Wei Mingshi, which meant that Long Qianma could make a large portion of the Chu clan's army betray him at any time. They could betray Western Zhou, or they could betray Chu Tianyin. As soon as Long Qianma returned to the room, Mu Qinggu, who had been waiting at the tea table for a long time, immediately stood up. "Your Majesty, how is it?" Although Long Qianma and the Mu family were master and servant, they were more like allies. Without the Mu family, Long Qianma's regime would have collapsed long ago. Although he had been the crown prince since he was a child, he'd been ill for years without much training. How was a young man like him supposed to deal with the unpredictable changes in Cloud Realm Continent over the past few years? Actually, the straightforward and upright Mu Qinggu was even less of a match. The true controller of Tianning's political power was General Mu. Today Long Tianma and Emperor Kong Cheng had a secret meeting. Long Tianma had formally handed Wei Mingshi over to the emperor. From tonight onward, Wei Mingshi would no longer be loyal to Long Tianma, but to Emperor Kong Cheng. Emperor Kong Cheng had promised to keep this a secret no matter what happened. Kong Cheng agreed. Everything went smoothly, Long Tianma murmured. Mu Qingwu nodded. Then I'll send a messenger hawk back immediately. My father must be anxious from waiting. A complicated look flickered past Long Tianma's eyes before he took Mu Qingwu's hand. Mu Qingwu gave a start before his gaze turned complicated as well. He could guess what Long Tianma wanted to ask. Your Majesty, this soldier really doesn't know anything about this. This soldier only found out a few days ago that Wei Mingshi was one of my father's men, Mu Qingwu replied honestly. Then do you know anything else? Long Tianma asked coldly. If General Mu's hands could reach into the Chu clan's troops, then what about the other armies? Did General Mu have other spies in the Northern Dynasty's Emperor's cavalry, Jun Yixie's cavalry barracks, the Ning clan troops and even the Bailey army? Long Tianma had always respected General Mu, but he couldn't help but be on guard this time. Just how deep were the foundations of the Mu family? Why was General Mu hiding his true strength? Was General Mu, this old fox with hidden depths, truly sincere in helping Tianning's imperial clan? Or did he have ulterior motives? Mu Qingwu could clearly sense Long Tianma's anger and wariness in his tone. I don't know if there are any, Mu Qingwu replied truthfully. Long Tianma suddenly grabbed Mu Qingwu by the collar and said angrily, Do you father and son take Zhen as a 3-year-old child? Mu Qingwu didn't struggle. Your Majesty, this soldier has never lied to your Majesty. Long Tianma calmed down at his words. He had always known Mu Qingwu's temperament and Mu Qingwu's character. When Mu Qingwu had pretended to get close to him, it was to investigate the embezzlement case of the disaster relief grain. After finding out that the case was the imperial uncle's doing and not the eastern palaces, Mu Qingwu and Long Tianma gradually became a monarch and subject who could talk about anything. Although they weren't friends, their relationship had long surpassed that. Mu Qingwu's words had calmed Long Tianma down because Mu Qingwu had spoken the truth. Mu Qingwu's words implied that he hadn't lied to Long Tianma yet, but he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't in the future. He could only listen to his father. Long Tianma flung his hand aside. Why does your father want to get involved in the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin and the Wind Clan? You should know that, right? Mu Qingwu still shook his head helplessly. He had to admit that his father's actions had frightened him. Long Tianma was angry, but so was he. It was just that he hid everything in the bottom of his heart. He was the only son of the Mu family and the sole heir to the Mu family army. But his father still treated him like an outsider and hid everything from him. What was he? Long Tianma couldn't calm the sullen anger in his heart. He flicked his sleeves and was about to leave when Mu Qingwu stopped him. Your Majesty, although this place is far from the 100 Poisons sect, it's still not safe. He stopped Long Tianma and walked out of the door. Your Majesty, rest early. With a bang, Long Tianma slammed the door shut and headed for the tea table, only to see a booklet on the table. When he opened it up, he saw that it was a letter from General Mu urging him to spread his bloodline for the Imperial Long clan as soon as possible. Long Tianma sneered. He hadn't taken a concubine since he ascended the throne, and he had never touched Mu Luiyue. Was General Mu standing up for his daughter? Based on the current situation, once Mu Luiyue became pregnant with the dragon seed, he might become the late emperor. He would never repeat his imperial father's mistakes. Long Tianma immediately called for the guards outside. Send orders back and prepare to take a concubine. If he wanted to produce more offspring for the imperial family, then he had to be fair. Mu Luiyue wanted to have a child, right? Let's rely on our own skills. Long Tianma threw the memorial to the floor and angrily sat down at the tea table. As he raged, the image of a serious, focused face surfaced in his mind. It had been a long time since he'd seen Han Yunxi. The deepest impression he had of her was her expression when she took his pulse. He never knew that a woman could be so serious and so beautiful. Was she here already? Would she be happy that Long Feiyi had avenged her in Great Central Town today? Just what was her relationship with Long Feiyi now? He had worshipped and revered Imperial Uncle Qin since he was a child. Now that he knew the man wasn't a member of the Tianning Imperial clan, he didn't hate him or denounce him. Instead, he admired him even more. For no other reason than the fact that the Eastern and Western Qin Imperial clan was the noblest in Cloud Realm continent. Their bloodlines were of the highest order. Han Yunxi was Imperial Uncle Qin's woman and his Imperial aunt, so he didn't dare to think too much about it. Now Han Yunshi had nothing to do with him and was Long Fei Ye's enemy. Still, he didn't dare to think too much about it. After all, she was born in the Western Qin imperial clan. The only one worthy of her was Long Fei. Was the Tianan Emperor's sleepless nights for the sake of his country, or for the sake of his love life? Mu Qinggu personally stood guard outside the door, arms crossed over his chest as he stood like a sturdy pine tree. However, that pair of eyes that had always been bright and full of vigor had unknowingly lost their luster. Was his sleepless nights for the sake of the army, or for the sake of his beloved woman? As the night grew darker, the northern winds whistled. Winter had already descended upon Cloud Realm continent. Northern Li's weather was the coldest of all. Currently, Ning Cheng was warming up wine in his tent. Even if he was drinking by himself, he could still drink to his heart's content. He was in a good mood because Bai Yuqiao's business was progressing smoothly. In less than a day, Bai Yuqiao had already bought 3 jugs. With Bai Yuqiao's skills, he'd probably be able to buy 10 jugs in the next few days and spend half of his silver drafts. He'd tampered with each of the banknotes so that Northern Li's Trade Consortium members would recognize them and hand them over to Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders. Once the news got out, he'd be able to continue competing with Jun Yixie without fear of repercussions. Thinking of this, Ning Cheng's single eye slowly blossomed into a sinister smile in the dusk, adding a hint of resolute evil to his cold and arrogant face. Now he just had to wait for news from 100 Poison Sect tomorrow. Jun Yixie was also in his tent, drinking by himself. He hadn't left his tent for a day, and Bai Yuqiao had also been guarding outside the door for a day. Both of them were waiting not for news from 100 Poison Sect, but for news from their master. Would their master go to 100 Poison Sect or come to Northern Li's Milky Way? Jun Yixie raised his wine cup high, toasting to the bright moon outside the window. His heart was toward the moon, but the moon was toward the ditch. He told himself that if his master didn't come tomorrow, then their master-disciple relationship would be over. A group of people in Three-Way Black Market were also waiting for news tomorrow, except for 2 people who didn't pay much attention to 100 Poison Sect. These 2 people were none other than Tang Li and Gu. Gu had already inquired about Deacon Jin's whereabouts in Willow Flower Lane. Someone saw Deacon Jin fighting with Uncle Cheng behind a brothel, but the outcome was unclear. Someone else saw Deacon Jin buying a carriage and leaving from the north gate of Three-Way Black Market. Uncle Cheng must have colluded with Deacon Jin to kidnap Ning Jing and the others. Tang Li said angrily. North? Gu pondered. Tang Li was shocked. Could they? Chapter 948. Are they going to seek refuge with Jun Yixie? Tang Li asked in shock. Gu rolled his eyes at him. Jun Yixie can't afford it. Jun Yixie couldn't repay Deacon Jin's debt, but Kangon Bank would pursue the matter to the end. Kangon Bank's influence in the business world couldn't be underestimated. Who wouldn't be wary of it? Gu couldn't imagine how many people would feel the same heartache as he did if the fact that Kangon Bank belonged to Long Fei Yi was exposed one day. For now, Long Fei Yi didn't need Kangon Bank to directly involve itself in the battle between the various powers. After all, the business world and the military world couldn't be completely intertwined. This was considered a backup plan. Tang Li was silent for a while. Suddenly, he grabbed Gu's hand tightly and said in shock, "Are we going to sell them to Winter Crow Kingdom as slaves?" Gu didn't even want to roll his eyes. He asked coldly, "How much can they be worth if they're sold to Winter Crow Kingdom? I might as well sell them to the Tang sect." Gu had only recently figured out the relationship between Tang Li and Long Fei Yi. After that, the more time he spent with Tang Li, the more he couldn't believe that Long Fei Yi had such a stupid younger brother. Then where are we going to find them? Tang Li wasn't stupid. He was just on the verge of a mental breakdown and couldn't think properly. Gu was also frustrated. How were they going to find them in such a big place if they were to head north? Mu Ling had always been the one chasing him everywhere. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be chasing Mu Ling. He couldn't find them the first time he chased them. It turned out that the feeling of not being able to catch someone wasn't very good. Let's go. We're heading north too. Gu made a prompt decision. Instead of wasting time here, they might as well chase after them. Perhaps they could find something. Mu Linger and Ning Jing were not stupid. They would find a way to leave some clues behind. If he remembered correctly, Mu Linger seemed to have told him a few years ago. When she searched for him all over the world, she would leave a mark wherever she went. Gu told this to Tang Li. Tang Li was overjoyed and quickly asked, "What mark?" Unexpectedly, Gu thought about it seriously for a long time before saying, "I forgot." Tang Li was so angry that he almost scolded Gu. Let's look for it first. Let's split up and search. Although there were many roads to the north of the three-way black market, there were only two general directions. One was west of the three-way battlefield, northwest of the three-way black market. The other was east of the three-way black market, northeast of the three-way black market. Northwest of the three-way black market was the border between western Zhou and northern Li. It was a war-torn place. After crossing the border there were many roads. One of the roads to the northwest led to Heavenly River City, where Ning Cheng's troops were stationed. Northeast of the three-way black market was the border between Tian'an and northern Li. It was a desolate place filled with towering mountains and steep mountain paths. Past the mountains was the east of northern Li, where the water plants were the most fertile. Deal. Gu agreed. I'll go east. Then I'll go northwest. Let's keep in touch if anything happens. Tang Li said seriously. The two of them each led a group of subordinates and left the three-way black market that very night. Before leaving, Gu asked his subordinates, "Have all the poison corpses arrived?" When he had rescued Poison Girl from Liberty City, he had mobilized a large group of poison corpses. Back then, he had even asked Qi Zonglin whether his poison corpses were stronger or Long Fei Yi's shadow guard was stronger. This time he could finally let Long Fei Yi see with his own eyes whether the shadow guard or the poison corpses were stronger. Thinking of this, Gu's lips curled into a smug smile. Yes, he did not know that his Poison Girl was still unconscious to this day. It was very uncertain how the battle at 100 Poison Sect would turn out. Uncle Cheng and Deacon Jean were naturally paying attention to the events at 100 Poison Sect. However, the two of them did not reveal anything to Ning Jing and Mu Ling. Stop the car. Mu Ling's loud voice broke the silence of the night. Veins were popping out on Uncle Cheng's forehead. On the way, Mu Ling had been making all sorts of demands just because she was pregnant. Not only had she asked for a lot of things, she had even complained about them in all sorts of ways. She had simply gone from bad to worse. Uncle Cheng did not have a good impression of her to begin with, and he hated her even more for secretly leaving him a piece of cloth last time. If Deacon Jean had not stopped him, it would have been strange if Uncle Cheng had not made things difficult for Mu Ling. Last time, Deacon Jean had said that Mu Ling and the child in her belly were his hostages. If anything happened to them, he would no longer work for Uncle Cheng. Uncle Cheng could only let him be. Mu Ling complained that the carriage was too hard and wanted a comfortable cushion. 3 days later, when they passed by a town, Deacon Jean really did find one for her. Mu Ling requested to drink a bowl of hot soup every day. Deacon Jean really would leave alone every evening and go to the nearby villages and towns to find one for her. Sometimes, when he could not find one, he would hunt some wild animals and cook them himself. Mu Ling wrote a prescription to prevent miscarriage. She wrote down a total of 20 Chinese medicinal herbs, including some expensive ones. Deacon Jean immediately asked Uncle Cheng for money and found everything for her. He stopped the carriage, boiled the soup and sent it to the carriage area. Those who did not know would really think that Deacon Jean was the child's father. "Stop the carriage," Deacon Jean said in a low voice. Uncle Cheng, who was driving the carriage, immediately became angry. What is she trying to do in the middle of the night? "Jeanzi, are you really the child's father?" "Stop the carriage." Deacon Jin's tone was much heavier. Under his bangs, his dark eyes were cold and deep, full of warning. Uncle Cheng was puzzled. Ever since the incident with the cloth strip, he did not know what Mu Ling and Deacon Jean had talked about. This guy had always been gloomy, and his mood had not improved since then. Could it be that this guy had taken a fancy to Mu Ling? Uncle Cheng quickly rejected this idea. Mu Ling was the real culprit behind Deacon Jin's debt, and Mu Ling's belly. How could Deacon Jean take a fancy to her? Or maybe he just wanted to take care of her and protect the baby so that he could bargain with Gu. When Uncle Cheng stopped the carriage, Ning Jing immediately felt much more comfortable. She had to stay in bed, so she did not get out of the carriage much. As a result, she often got carsick and needed to stop to rest. This situation was becoming more and more frequent. Every time she could not help it, Mu Ling would make up all kinds of reasons to stop the carriage to give her some time to adjust. "I want to vomit." As soon as Mu Ling finished speaking, she leaned against the window and vomited. Ning Jing leaned against the window and laughed secretly. She did not realize that she had been talking and laughing with Mu Ling for a long time. Ever since she was young, she had never been so close, even with her own sister. Uncle Cheng sat motionless and Deacon Jean lowered his eyes and did not move. Mu Ling vomited for a while, then leaned against the window in exhaustion. Hearing no movement, Uncle Cheng was about to set off, but Mu Ling stopped him. Let's rest tonight. I really can't take it anymore. Before Uncle Cheng could say anything, Deacon Jean said in a deep voice, let's go. They were on the run, hurrying and not sightseeing. Mu Ling anxiously wanted to take the medicine. Among the medicines that she had asked Ning Ching to prepare, there were some that could cause mild poisoning and vomiting. Otherwise, how could she have fooled them along the way? Don't take it anymore. I'm really fine. Ning Jing stopped her. I'm fine too. You don't look so good today. Don't force yourself, Mu Ling said seriously. I'm really fine. Ning Jing's face was serious. I won't fight with you with the child's life. Mu Ling compromised this time. After putting on a show of protest, she slammed the window shut. Ling Deacon Jean is acting strangely towards you. Ning Jing had been observing for a long time. Although Deacon Jean did not admit his identity, she was sure that she just could not guess who the old man was. What's so strange about him? Mu Ling asked. He's very nice to you. Ning Jing's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't have taken a fancy to you, would he? As soon as she said that, Mu Ling almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She covered her mouth and snickered. Ning Jing, Tang Li is the one who treats you well. Deacon Jean is afraid that something will happen to my belly and he won't be able to get the ransom. If he really liked me, he would have stopped the car long ago. Mu Ling sighed. But those who have a bottom line have ulterior motives. They're not really good. Ning Jing, who was extremely difficult to convince, was convinced by Mu Ling. Ning Jing gently stroked her slightly bulging belly under her skirt. She thought of Tang Li and how good Tang Li was. Did Tang Li's kindness have a bottom line? Suddenly she missed him so much. The mountain forest was silent. The wheels of the carriages rumbled as they gradually moved north. Unknowingly, the sky in the east began to turn white. The sky was bright. How many people in 100 Poison Sect in Great Central County were looking at the same sky? Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei stayed by Han Yunxi's side for another night. There was only half a day left before the challenge. What should they do? The room was so quiet that it was as if time had stopped. Suddenly, a series of hurried knocks on the door broke the silence. Your Highness, something big has happened. Something very big. Your Highness, quickly open the door. Your Highness, Bai Yanqing has shown up. Su Donglin wouldn't have dared to disturb them if it wasn't something serious. However, Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei were indifferent. Long Fei Yi was still looking at Han Yunxi gently. Gu Beiwei sat in the outer room with a deathly stillness. It was only when Su Donglin told them the big news that the two of them were shocked. Su Donglin said, Bai Yanqing has accepted the challenge. He's even set up a banquet at the foot of 100 Poison Sect's mountain and invited guests from all over to be the witnesses for today's challenge. Your Highness, the people in Great Central County are all heading towards 100 Poison Sect. When Gu Beiwei walked out, Su Donglin finally let out a sigh of relief. If the two of them still didn't come out, he was really afraid that they would have fainted like the princess. What's Bai Yanqing's motive for doing this? Gu Beiwei asked calmly. Bai Yanqing clearly knew that he wouldn't be able to fight against Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi together, otherwise he wouldn't have escaped last time. Without hostages in his hands, it was uncertain whether he would show himself or not. Who would have thought that not only would he show himself, he would even summon all the spectators with such fanfare? What was he planning to do? Could it be that his poison storage space is stronger than the princess? Su Donglin asked worriedly. Gu Beiwei was also worried. He only knew that the poison storage space was at the 3rd level, but didn't know much about it. If Bai Yanqing advanced to the 3rd level, how much stronger would he be compared to the princess? Gu Beiwei looked back and saw that Long Fei Yi still hadn't come out. He sighed softly and fell silent again. If the princess didn't wake up, no matter how big the matter was, he wouldn't be able to call out Long Fei Yi. Su Donglin also fell silent, waiting at the door with Gu Beiwei as time passed. It was getting closer to noon and 100 Poison Sect was already very lively. Momo is away on a business trip for the annual meeting. I'll be updating every day for the next few days. Chapter 949. There were only 2 more hours until noon. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had jointly issued a challenge to Bai Yanqing. Logically speaking, they should have been at the 100 Poison Sect's gates by now. However, at this time, everyone had arrived except for the two of them. Bai Yanqing had ordered people to set up a grand banquet in front of the 100 Poison Sect's gates and invite all the guests. He even set up a stage for the competition. No matter what medicine he had up his sleeves, his methods were even more ruthless than Emperor Kong Cheng's. This way, every detail of the competition, including every word he, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi had exchanged, would be made public. Everyone present would bear witness to the competition. Not only would they bear witness to the outcome, but also to the cause of the civil war in the Great Qin Empire. Smart people could tell that Bai Yanqing wasn't just setting up a stage for the competition, but also to clarify the cause of the civil war. The two sides of the stage were filled with guests. Of course, everyone was afraid that the 100 Poisons sect would take advantage of the situation to harm them, but they couldn't back down now that they'd received an invitation. Otherwise they'd be laughed at. Moreover, the 100 Poisons sect wouldn't openly make an enemy of the entire world or do anything despicable in such a large venue. As a result, Western Zhou and Tian'an didn't come in person, but sent their own representatives instead. Emperor Kong Cheng sent the head of the Imperial Guards and his personal bodyguard, Commander Wang. Long Tianma sent none other than Mu Qingguo. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's Council of Elders, the Bailey Army's young General Bailey Chiu, representatives from Medical City, Medicine City, and a few other Jianghu factions and aristocratic families were all present. At this moment, everyone was whispering to each other and discussing spiritedly. What's going on? Are the East Qin Crown Prince and Western Qin Princess playing us for fools? They won't come, right? Ehe, what a joke. I knew it. How could East and Western Qin cooperate? They're playing us like monkeys. As I see it, this can't be faked. 100 Poison sect had already set up the stage, so how could it be fake? There's an 80% chance that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi are scared. Of course, the people who said these words were the forces of the underworld, the aristocrats, and the Eastern and Western Qin factions. Although they looked calm, they were on the verge of a mental breakdown. Last night, they had been trying to contact Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi. Unfortunately, they couldn't find them. After worrying all night, they couldn't help but wonder if Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi would come. Long Fei and Han Yunshi weren't just toying with the rest of the world. They were even toying with their own people. The time was getting closer and closer, but there was still no sign of him. Even though it was a cold day, many people were sweating from anxiety. Even Su Donglin didn't believe it. Bailey Chiu asked his subordinate in a low voice. No, I've already sent people to look for him. Young General, could something have happened to His Highness? His subordinate asked worriedly. What could have happened to His Highness? Bailey Chiu scolded unhappily. Right now, he was most worried that Han Yunshi had bewitched His Highness and left this mess behind to run off to the ends of the world. Only his father and himself knew the truth between His Highness and Han Yunshi. It had to be said that Han Yunshi was very innocent. Over at Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, a few elders were suspecting Han Yunshi as well. The princess was the one who suggested the cooperation. What does it mean to leave everyone here? Myriad Merchant Hall is being too careless, isn't it? It's fine if the princess is willful, but they're following suit? If Master Ning was here, this wouldn't have happened. Just where is the princess? She won't really not come, right? Yesterday, that East Qin Crown Prince humiliated Qi Zonglin like a dog and even said he was avenging the princess. There are rumors everywhere now. Could the East Qin Crown Prince have taken the princess away? As the time drew nearer, everyone grew impatient. The discussions grew more and more heated until they were soon filled with discontent. The cooperation between Eastern and Western Qin really is out of the ordinary. They've fooled everyone. Isn't that so? Isn't Han Yunshi a direct descendant of the Poison sect? What, did she hide as soon as 100 Poison sect accepted the challenge? How is this fooling people? Are they joining forces to hide in their shells like turtles? The world was so big, so there were bound to be a few dregs who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The two masters who'd spoken were from unknown origins, but their voices were especially loud. Bailey Chiu couldn't sit still any longer. He stood up and said loudly, "The East Qin Crown Prince arrived at Great Central Village yesterday and is on his way here." As for the Western Qin Princess, Bailey Chiu didn't finish before he shot a provocative look at Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Although Bailey Chiu was impulsive, he was still a schemer. His words were to tell the crowd that the East Qin Crown Prince was already here and didn't shrink back. Instead, he pushed the blame onto the Western Qin Princess. Secondly, he wanted to sound out the Western Qin people. Perhaps they knew where His Highness and the Western Qin Princess were and whether they were coming or not. Unfortunately, Bailey Chiu had underestimated the situation and overestimated his own intelligence. How could a mere soldier like him beat the elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium who'd been in the business world for years? Second elder sneered. Echoing Bailey Chiu's words, he said, The West Qin princess came with your highness. Why isn't the young general aware? Apart from the people of Myriad Merchant Hall, no one else present actually knew about this. Second elder's words were a cut above Bailey Chiu's. First, he wanted to tell the crowd that Han Yunshi was already here and didn't shrink back. Second, Han Yunshi was traveling with the Long Fei Yi. If anything happened to her or if she went missing, then the Long Fei Yi would bear more responsibility as a man. Third, he wanted to sound out the East Qin people. Perhaps they knew what had happened between the Long Fei Yi and the princess. Would they come or not? But as soon as second elder finished speaking, Bailey Chiu lost his temper and demanded, "What do you mean by that?" Everyone had been paying attention to them to begin with, but now the crowd fell silent. Seeing Bailey Chiu's reaction, second elder's eyes flashed with calculation before he smiled. That's exactly what I mean. Does the young general not understand human speech? In such a big occasion, if the dignified Bailey army's young general made a fool of himself, said something out of line, or did something out of line, then the Bailey army's reputation would be ruined. Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi desperately hoped that the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin all those years ago was a misunderstanding and that today would be the beginning of peace. But the people from both camps didn't think so. They were here to confront each other and push all the blame for the civil war on the other side. Everyone in both camps was eager to use this opportunity to humiliate the other side and turn them into a laughingstock. As expected, Bailey Chiu couldn't take the provocation and stood up with a slap on the table. "I dare you to say that again." The second elder snorted lightly and didn't continue to respond. Bailey Chiu immediately picked up his weapon and prepared to charge over. But as soon as he took his first step, a familiar voice came from the silent crowd. "Young general, it's rare for friends from all walks of life to gather here today. Let's give everyone some face and talk things out." Following the voice, the speaker was another young general, the Tian Emperor's representative Mu Qinggu. The goaded Bailey Chiu immediately understood what was going on. The fury in his heart flared even more, but he held it in this time. Everyone was waiting for his highness and the princess. Who knew what would happen? If he made the first move, Western Qin would definitely make a big deal out of it. Not only would they become a laughingstock in 100 Poisons sect, but they would also become the laughingstock of the world. His sin would be too great. Mu Qingwu's words were too clever. Not only did they remind Bailey Chiu but they also gave him a way out. Bailey Chiu generously put down his sword and bowed to Mu Qingwu. "Alright, let's focus on the bigger picture." But as soon as Bailey Chiu sat down, the 100 Poisons sect guards burst into laughter. "Dogs are the ones who don't understand human speech, aren't they?" A figure flew out from the crowd and landed in front of the stage. This person was in his 50s. He had a small goatee and wore a long gray robe. He was very low-key, but it couldn't hide his innate nobility. When he laughed, he gave off a sense of unfettered arrogance. No one knew who he was, but one thing was for sure. He was from 100 Poisons sect. I didn't expect the Bailey army to have such a cowardly soldier." He looked at Bailey Chiu and laughed even more savagely. "But it doesn't matter. You're not the most cowardly one. The most cowardly one is Long Fei Yi." This time, Bailey Chiu didn't care whether this person was mocking him or trying to goad him. He immediately raised his sword and jumped out of his seat. "Who do you think you are? Come and fight me if you dare. Whether you're a coward or not, we'll know once we fight." Someone like you doesn't deserve to fight, old man. There's still 2 hours left. Old man will stand here and watch how Long Fei Yi is cowardly. Everyone take a look too. When he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped into the air and landed on the stage with his hands behind his back. He stood as steady as a pine tree. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Bailey Chiu's face paled. Did this old man mean to stand on the stage and wait for Long Fei Yi to come? So he was, by Yanqing. Mu Qingwu muttered to himself. The scene quickly quieted down. Bailey Chiu didn't dare to act rashly, but he didn't embarrass Long Fei Yi. He quickly recovered and glared. By Yanqing, just you wait. Wait for his highness to deal with you. By Yanqing didn't argue with Bailey Chiu and just snorted disdainfully. He stood still on the stage and looked around. His gaze was fixed on the intersection in front of him. He would wait. These days he had been tracking Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi's whereabouts, but to no avail. He was also very curious as to why Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi hadn't shown up yet. No one knew, but he hoped more than anyone else that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi would appear today. Even if Gu Beiwei was no longer in his hands, he could still defeat Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi. Last time at Black Tower was an accident, but this time, it definitely was. He had waited for this day for far too long. Silence reigned over the large crowd. Almost everyone was seeing Bai Yanqing for the first time, so they were both shocked and curious. But none of them dared to talk about it. There were only 2 hours left. Could Bai Yanqing wait for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi? Right now, Han Yunxi had just opened her eyes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.